Chapter 409. These ungrateful wretches. When they use people, their eyes look forward, but when they don't use people, their faces look backward. Tiger's Mane said angrily. Tiger's Mane is right. They don't need to pay attention to such people. Beta Persei also said in a low voice. He was really afraid that if he spoke too loudly, it would startle the young master. Last time, the young master had said that if he were to speak loudly again, he would be sent to the front lines to fight on the battlefield. Beta Persei was naturally not afraid of going to the battlefield, but he was unwilling to leave Yang Qindong's side no matter what. Yang Qindong looked at Beta Persei, who had deliberately lowered his voice, and couldn't help but smile. Well, Beta Persei, you're doing well, but isn't it very tiring to speak like this? Young master, it's not tiring at all. As long as I can be by the young master's side, this is nothing. Beta Persei chuckled, not showing the slightest bit of reluctance. All right, stop pretending. I know it's hard for you to speak softly, so the young master found a job for you. You can speak loudly, and the louder you are, the better. What do you think? Yang Qindong smiled and gave Beta Persei an order. After hearing the whole plan, Beta Persei chuckled. Young master, don't worry. I promise to do this well and let them know what the real lion's roar is. Very good. Yang Qindong patted Beta Persei's shoulder in satisfaction, then said to Tiger's Mane, call the first and second guard squads here. The young master needs to arrange the work. This time, we want to be the imaginary enemy of the entire cold front and auxiliary soldiers. We want to teach those rookies a lesson by fighting against a few thousand. Yes. When Tiger's Mane heard that there was going to be a battle, even though it looked like a drill, the thought of a few dozen against a few thousand made him excited. He immediately agreed happily and turned around to call for reinforcements. Beta Persei looked aggrieved. Young master, I want to follow you too. Forget it. Don't you have more important things to do? Besides, it's better for you to stay away from military exercises. Have you forgotten that during the last exercise, I asked you to fake a fight and show mercy to your brothers, but you injured one of them with a slap? You were too heavy-handed. Yang Qindong brought up the past. Beta Persei was very strong due to his tall stature. Even if he held back, a slap was far from what an ordinary person could withstand. Young master, I'll use 30% of my strength this time. Beta Persei still wanted to fight for a chance. Okay, you can go if you want. Get things done first. When they stop bothering this young master, you can come to the forest to find us. Yang Qindong had given Yang a glimmer of hope, but in return, Yang had a bitter expression. Perhaps Yang also knew that what he was about to do was a protracted battle, and it wasn't something that could be easily accomplished. Tiger's Mane quickly conveyed Yang Qindong's message. The first and second guard teams, a total of 40 people, plus 20 people from the Wolfang Special Forces and 20 people from the Ghost Sniper team gathered in front of Yang Qindong. Jungle warfare was like a hunting war. In addition to some pursuit and interception, the most important thing was to hide. For a jungle veteran, the jungle was like having a logistics base. Sometimes, a jungle veteran could kill some inexperienced soldiers with traps and take away their weapons. There was an endless supply of edible plants and animals in the jungle. Fire might be the best way to deal with jungle warfare, but it was only suitable for temperate jungles. Tropical rainforests were an exception. During the U.S.-Vietnam War, the U.S. military suffered a lot in jungle warfare. In terms of strategy, jungle warfare might only be to kill a large number of enemies and attack the enemy's logistics to restrain the enemy. In terms of tactics, jungle warfare affected the performance of many high-tech weapons. In the jungle, ears were sometimes more important than eyes. In the jungle, your energy would be consumed by everything around you. Among them, the best tactics were to ambush or wait for the right opportunity. Yang Qindong knew that the role of firearms in jungle warfare would be reduced by at least 30%. In other words, the advantage of the cold front would be reduced to 70% of the original. In order to make up for this shortcoming, more training was needed. Sweat more during training and bleed less during wartime. Although a qualified cold vanguard knew how to disguise and hide, there was a big difference between fighting in the forest and fighting in it. In order to better unleash one's strength, targeted training was very necessary. The team gathered. Before they left, Yang Chundong first told his wife, Hu Yen, and third wife, Lady Shui, that he would be away for a few days. If needed, he would come back at any time. Then, he called Yang San and arranged a few things for him. Nanming wanted to lower their heads to the various powers in Yunnan. This was not something he would allow. If that happened, it would be the same as interrupting his plan. So, what he needed to do was destroy Zhu Qizhen's fantasy and force him to beg and use him. After everything was arranged, Yang Chindong left the barracks with his men in the afternoon. Guaning and Ma Wei, who knew nothing about this, were sitting in the yamen of Gaozhou. General Yu Guang was reporting to them some of the information he had gathered, saying that information was a bit of an exaggeration. He was just stating some facts. General Ma, General Guan, ever since the mercenary army came to Gaozhou, they didn't have any intention of entering the city. They only set up camp 10 li away from the south of the city. The area 5 li away from their camp has been designated as a restricted military zone. Our men tried to enter a few times to investigate but were beaten back. General Yu Guang lowered his head when he said this. He was obviously ashamed of his men's incompetence. Wait, what did you just say? Beaten back? They really dared to do it? When Ma Wei heard this, a trace of fear flashed across his face. He obviously didn't expect this situation. Yes, they were beaten back. It's just that they knew their limits. The men they sent only suffered superficial injuries. They'll be fine after a few days of rest. Yu Guang nodded and admitted. How dare they? Where do they think they are? This is the territory of our southern Ming dynasty. Every blade of grass and every tree here belongs to us. They actually dared to touch our people in our territory. They are truly audacious. General Yu, didn't you think of retaliating? Ma Wei said angrily. He was the commander of the Guangdong Guards. In principle, once a war broke out in Guangdong, he was the leader of the army and had the authority to command any guards under him. The mercenary army beat up the Ming army here. That was equivalent to slapping his face. They didn't give him any face. How could he not be angry? Retaliate? Yu Guang raised his head when he heard this, then shook it violently. Our brothers can't beat those mercenaries. Yu Guanghui said this because he had worked with these people before. Thinking back to when they were on good terms, he had worked with Wu Shang's 1st Battalion of the Cold Front. He had personally witnessed their powerful military strength, especially the firearms in their hands that could fire consecutively and were incomparably accurate. The power of those firearms shocked him even more. For such weapons, he had even discussed with Wu Shang to see if he could get himself one to show off. Originally, he thought that since he had asked for it, Wu Shang would at least give him some face. Never would he have thought that the usually easygoing Wu Shang would shake his head firmly and say that he didn't have the authority to do so. Yu Guang naturally didn't believe such words. How could a general not have the authority to give a weapon to a friend? He thought that this must be a lie and was very unhappy about it for a while. It was because he had enough understanding of those firearms that Yu Guang was very clear that with his strength, he was definitely not a match for the mercenaries. It was better to not fight this battle to avoid humiliating himself. Yu Guang bluntly said that they couldn't beat the mercenaries. When Ma Wei heard these words, his face alternated between red and white, but he really didn't know what to say because he also thought the same in his heart. After holding it in for a long time, he finally spat out a sentence. But we can't let them hurt our people for nothing. They have to give us an explanation. They did. They said that the area within a 5-mile radius of the military camp is a restricted military zone. As long as we're outside this zone, they won't care what we do. Yu Guang told the mercenaries the answer they gave him. However, this answer only made Ma Wei angrier. This was clearly looking down on him, but he couldn't do anything about it. Who asked him to be weaker than them? If they really fought, then the one who would lose face and suffer losses would only be him. Ma Wei was so depressed that he didn't know what to do. His expression was extremely ugly. His gaze involuntarily fell on Guaning, who was beside him. In his heart, this person still had some ideas when faced with trouble. However, when facing the mercenaries, how many people could come up with a better idea? Unless the Southern Ming Empire was willing to put in a lot of effort, it was only an army of 8,000 people. If they could gather tens or even hundreds of thousands of people, they could use up all of these 8,000 people. However, right now, they didn't even have enough military strength to deal with the Yunnan matter. Where would they find the strength to deal with Yang Chendong? Noticing that Ma Wei and Yu Guang were both looking at him, Guaning shook his head and said, "Let's wait until tomorrow. When we see that Yang Chendong, we'll tell him about these things and see how he responds. His two wives are still beiming. I don't believe he would dare to risk universal condemnation and start a rebellion." "That's right. Tomorrow we'll go ask this Count of Loyalty and see how he answers us." Guaning nodded. At this time, he didn't notice that there was already a problem with his attitude. It was fine if he didn't call him Imperial Envoy, but he didn't even call him Duke of Loyalty. Instead, he still called him Count of Loyalty that Ingzong had given him. Could it be that he forgot that he had asked him to help him deal with the Huang bandit army? Chapter 410. This was the weakness of human nature. Oftentimes, people would only remember how good they were to others. Oftentimes, the good that others had done to them would be thrown out of their minds. The night passed quickly, and some things happened that outsiders didn't know about. For example, Yang Chendong led less than 100 of the best and made preparations in the nearby forest. At dawn, Commander Wu Shang of the Cold Front Battalion led 400 men, 1 auxiliary battalion, and 2 temporary auxiliary battalions towards the mountains. Their goal was to find the 6th young master there and surround him to complete the assessment. Guaning, Ma Wei, and General Yu Guang, who were oblivious to all of this, took their 200 personal guards and headed towards the mercenary camp after eating breakfast early in the morning. As if they were already aware of their arrival, no one stopped them on the way. When they arrived at the camp, the tall Beta Persei appeared. "What are you doing here? Are you here to see our young master's ugliness?" Beta Persei stood in front of Guaning and the others, and then spoke in a voice that was close to a roar. This sudden shout caused the 3 generals who were still riding on their horses to tremble violently. At this moment, not only did they feel their eardrums ringing, even the horses they were riding on were completely shocked at this moment. They kept kicking their hind legs, causing the 3 generals to almost fall off their horses. With great difficulty, Ma Wei forcefully restrained the horse. With a stern face, he said to Yang Er, "What are you doing? Why are you speaking so loudly?" "How am I speaking loudly? This is how I speak. If you don't want to listen, then please leave. I don't think anyone invited you here." His voice was raised by an octave. After another round of provocation, the warhorse finally couldn't hold back and began to jump. Because of a moment of carelessness, General Yu Guang was thrown off the horse. Guaning and Ma Wei saw that the situation wasn't good. They hurriedly jumped off their horses and didn't follow behind. "You!" Ma Wei reached out and helped General Yu Guang up from the ground. He angrily pointed at Beta Persei and wanted to say something. However, Guaning stopped his actions and said in a respectful tone, "You're the Yang brothers, right? You just said that we're here to see your young master make a fool of himself. What's going on? What happened to Count Zhongdan?" "My family's young master has been sick for several days. His body is very weak and his face is very pale. Didn't you come to see the young master now because you want to see the young master's ugly state? Let me tell you, that's impossible. My young master is wise and mighty. He won't let you see his bad side. Also, my family's young master is the Duke of Zhongdan, not the Count of Zhongdan as you said. If you still call him that, it's disrespectful to the young master. If that's the case, don't blame me for being rude to you." As soon as Yang Er finished his roar, a row of Cold Front soldiers began to move towards them. Further away, there were more cold warriors glaring at them. It seemed that as long as Beta Persei casually shouted, these people would immediately attack and teach them how to behave. The shouting was soul-stirring, and the situation was so unforgiving. Guaning, Ma Wei, and the others, who were completely suppressed, knew that it was impossible to see Yang Chendong today and denounce him. They were not prepared. They thought that with their status, Yang Chendong would not dare to do anything openly. But now, they couldn't even see the person in question. Even if they had reason, it was useless. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Guaning asked, "Brother Beta Persei, when will your family's young master recover? Don't ask me about this. I'm not a doctor. Why don't you come back in a few days? Maybe when the young master recovers, he can see you." Beta Persei saw that Guaning was being polite, so he also said politely, but his voice was still as loud as before. When Guaning and the others heard it, they couldn't help but frown. They couldn't force their way in, and they couldn't see the person, so there was no use in staying here. With no other choice, Guaning and Ma Wei looked at each other and decided to leave first. After a few days, when Yang Qindong's body was better, they would come back to visit. Guaning, Ma Wei, and the others were about to leave. Lung Feng didn't make things difficult for them, but only watched them leave. Not long after, as soon as the three of them entered the city gates of Gaozhou, a trusted soldier came to report that the embroidered uniform guard had arrived. The embroidered uniform guard had arrived. The one who came was Commander Wei Guang, a fourth-rank official. This fourth-rank official was extremely high. Even in front of Ma Wei, who was a third-rank official, it was still slightly higher. The four of them met in a secret room in the back courtyard of the magistrate's office. It could be seen that the matter they were talking about was extremely confidential and not to be known to outsiders. As soon as the four of them met, Wei Guang found the main seat and sat down. Guaning was a little unhappy about this, but even Ma Wei, who was of a higher rank than him, didn't say anything, so he simply kept his mouth shut. He wanted to hear what this high-ranking official of the embroidered uniform guard had to say. "Have you seen Yang Qindong?" After the four of them sat down, Wei Guang asked first. No. The one who answered him was General Yu Guang. He probably knew that his position wasn't very high and was only a general of a magistrate. At this time, it was most appropriate for him to answer Wei Guang's question. His servant said that he was sick. Sick? After hearing this, Wei Guang's eyes couldn't help but light up, as if he had thought of something. He said that he was sick, and said that he was very miserable, as if he couldn't even get out of bed. But from this general's point of view, this seems to be half-hearted. At this time, Ma Wei opened his mouth, his face full of displeasure. Obviously, he felt that today's trip was somewhat embarrassing. Unexpectedly, after he finished speaking, Wei Guang, who was sitting there, actually nodded his head lightly. Perhaps his illness is true, but it shouldn't be illness, and it could be poison. Poison! Suddenly hearing this, Ma Wei, Guaning, and Yu Guang's eyes couldn't help but light up, then darken. Obviously, they thought of a certain possibility. Yes, we received news that someone had assassinated Yang Qindong, and they even used poison. It's just that there hasn't been any concrete reports. Looking at it now, it is very likely to be true. Alright, General Yu Guang, you've been here for the longest time. May I ask if you've seen Yang Qindong when the mercenaries arrived? Wei Guang nodded as he voiced his guess. Then he asked Yu Guang. No, I have seen some of the other mercenary generals, but this Yang Qindong, I really haven't seen him once. After thinking for a while, Yu Guang suddenly slapped his thigh and said, Haha, that makes sense. It seems that he is very likely poisoned, and the reason why the army stopped here and didn't leave is to let him treat his illness. We can't even rule out another possibility, which is that something has happened to him, but he didn't tell the outside world. Wei Guang smiled and nodded his head. This time, he had come under Menda's secret order to check on Yang Qindong's situation. Su Maner's sudden disappearance made Menda suspect that she had already made her move, and then was silenced by Yang Qindong in a fit of anger. But in the end, everything was just a guess. This time, he sent Wei Guang to get a clear answer. Wei Guang had seen Su Maner before and naturally knew of her beauty. He believed that if it were him, he wouldn't have the slightest bit of defense against such a beautiful woman. Therefore, he judged others by himself and thought that Yang Qindong might have fallen into a trap. That was why when he heard Ma Wei and the others say that they didn't see the main culprit and that the other party said that he was sick, he made such a guess. At this moment, even Yang Qindong probably didn't expect that he didn't come here because the other party's position was too low and not worth meeting. He didn't think that it would become the main basis for guessing that something had happened to him. The basis for guessing that something had happened to Yang Qindong was Su Miner's disappearance. As for whether this woman would stop halfway, Menda didn't even think about it. A woman who lived only for the sake of her family. Once she saw a little hope, how could she stop? Ah, if Yang Qindong is really poisoned, this is our chance. After Guanyin heard Wei Guang's seemingly determined tone, he suddenly had a feeling that his eyes lit up. Could this headless mercenary army be of use to him? Guanyin wasn't the only one who thought of this. Ma Wei's eyes also lit up. If these mercenaries could be used by him, then the safety of Guangdong would have more protection. As the commander of the Guangdong Guards, he would have more confidence in doing things. There is a chance, but we can't make a move on the mercenaries. Wei Guang seemed to have thought of something. After all, the embroidered uniform guards had a wide source of information and knew a lot of information that ordinary people didn't know. We won't make a move on the mercenaries. Didn't they recruit over 4,000 people from the Huang bandit army? We only need them. Guanyin naturally knew how terrifying the mercenaries were. He also knew that the mercenaries in front of him weren't all of them. As for how powerful the entire mercenary army was, it was only a guess based on his imagination. The embroidered uniform guards had secretly sent people out to sea before, but without exception, there was no news. Since they didn't know how powerful Ling Feng was, it was best not to provoke him and not to make an enemy out of him. However, it didn't matter. Those things had nothing to do with him. He only needed to do the things in front of him well. That was to recruit these people who joined the mercenary army later on for his own use. Ever since he saw the glory of the mercenary army on the battlefield, Guanyin wanted to build an army like this. This way, the overall strength of the South Ming army would increase by more than one level. With the addition of these people, his wish might come true sooner. Chapter 4:11. That's right, we are only after those 4,000 people, Ma Wei said in the same tone. Then he and Guanyin looked at each other. Could be seen that at this moment, there was an element of competition between them. Well, that's possible. Then we'll use our own methods. Wei Guang also received a mission, which was to bring some mercenaries back to the capital to resume their duties. From these people, they might be able to get more information about the mercenaries, which would play a crucial role in how to deal with them in the future. As a result, the three parties began to secretly compete with each other. They were all rushing towards the same goal, which was to persuade the original Huang bandits who had just joined the mercenaries to join their side and be used by them. Yang Qindong did not expect this war at all. When he received this news, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Since they want to create more problems, let's play with them. Pass down the order, let's have Yang Er and Yang Wu put on a good show with them. In short, the longer they delay, the better. After Yang Qindong finished speaking, someone had already passed on the order. He himself was standing on the mountainside, looking in the direction of the southwest. At this time, his eyes seemed to be able to see some of the chaotic situation there. Yunnan. It was Jules and his bastard sons who started this mess. Zhu Li, the 18th son of Zhu Yuanzhang, was born with Zhou Fei. In the 24th year of Hongwu, 1391, he was given the title of Min Province. For years later, because Yunnan was newly attached, he needed a prince to govern it. In the first year of Jiangwen, the Marquis of Shiping, Mu Chang, accused the Min king of misconduct, and the Jiangwen emperor demoted him to a commoner. After Zhu Di's death, Zhu Li's title was restored. This Min king Zhu Li was not a good person. Since he was restored to the throne, he acted recklessly, indulged in the old customs, took the seals of various departments, and killed officials. After Zhu Di found out, he took away his vassal king's seal, and then cut off his guards. Later, perhaps because Zhu Di cared for his younger brother, he returned the seal to him. After Ming Runzong ascended the throne, he moved Zhu Yi to Huguang Wugong and lived there. A long time later, a mansion was built for him. At that time, he was almost 50 years old. Zhu Yi was very bad, and so were his sons. Especially the son of a concubine, Prince of Guangdong Zhu Huili and Prince of Yangzhong Zhu Huili, In order to compete for the property of the Prince of Min's mansion, they had already quarreled with their elder brother, Prince of Jinan Zhu Huili. The reason was that Zhu Huiliang and Zhu Huiliang's mother, Su, didn't have a high status. She was afraid that her two sons would be in a disadvantageous position when dividing the family property. So, she took advantage of the muddle-headedness of the old king of Min and stole from the king of Min's mansion many times. Finally, one day, when she was caught in the act, the ashamed Su Shi hanged herself. Her mother, who stole things, died. How could the two living treasures just let it go? Especially Zhu Huili, who was full of evil tricks. First, he tore down the wall and opened the door, forcibly opened the inner and outer treasury, and took the gold and silver of the family. Then, he reported to the imperial court, saying that his brother Zhu Huili forced his concubine mother to death, and the imperial court should uphold justice. After Ming Yingzong heard about it, he sent the prince consort and the imperial censor to investigate. They found that it was not like what Zhu Huili said. Then, he sent an imperial edict to warn Zhu Yi and his son. If you violate the rules, I dare not do it. After that, the Prince of Min's mansion was quiet for a while. But then the outbreak of the Tumu Castle broke this silence. Because Ming Yingzong's army was defeated and retreated back to Nanjing to establish the southern Ming dynasty, Zhu Qiyu took over the throne and became the emperor of Baiming. The big and powerful Ming dynasty was divided into north and south, and its strength was greatly reduced. Almost at this time, the old king of Min, Zhu Yi, died. Jinan Zhu Huili became the second king of Min, also called king of Minzhuang. In history, the brothers were incompatible with each other. After Zhu Huili became the new king of Minzhuang, the conflicts between them began to escalate. But because of the appearance of Yang Chendong, everything changed. Since Zhu Qizhen and Zhu Qiyu could separate and become the North and South emperors, why couldn't they? Did they have to be entangled with the issue of king of Min? Not to mention that the two brothers originally had titles, namely Guangdong King Zhu Huili and Yangzong King Zhu Huili. Among the three of them, Zhu Huili was the quickest to react. Just when his elder brother Zhu Huili inherited the throne, he and his younger brother Yangzong King Zhu Huili came to congratulate him, which made his elder brother and the guards in the family very nervous. But when there were no outsiders, Zhu Huili and his younger brother Zhu Huili told their thoughts to their elder brother Zhu Huili, and the new king of Min was tempted. Since the Ming dynasty could be divided into north and south, why couldn't they divide another one? As long as the three brothers were united, what couldn't they do? After all, the land that could be ruled by the king of Min was still small. If they could fight for it, how big would the world be? Kings, nobles, generals, and ministers were all noble. Not to mention that the blood of the Zhu family originally flowed in their bodies, which was the bloodline of the royal family. Just like that, the three ambitious brothers began to work together and secretly made preparations. They wanted to take advantage of the time when Yingzong's influence in the south was not completely stabilized to make their move. When the ancient people started a rebellion, they needed a reason. For example, Liu Bang, the ancestor of the Han dynasty, killed the White Snake and Emperor Xian. There was a servant in Guangdong King Zhu Huili's house called Duan Yuhong. His father, Duan Hongshan, was a person who knew magic. He was recommended to come here and introduce to Yu Libin, who was good at physiognomy. After planning, Yu Libin appeared as a guest at a large banquet held by King of Min. When he saw the new king of Minzhuang, Zhu Huili, he said with a shocked look, "The king's physiognomy is really rare in the world. As long as you have the heart to fight for it, you can succeed. The time should be last year. Can't be later than May or June this year. You can directly send troops to the east to Nanjing and you can ascend the throne." When Yu Libin was talking, outside the hall, some guards holding swords walked in and stood on both sides. They looked like they were ready to fight, forcing the guests to make a statement. Two brothers, Guangdong King Zhu Huili and Yangzong King Zhu Huili, took the lead and bowed, saying that they would support their elder brother. This made the other guests have no choice but to make a statement. One by one, they knelt down and shouted. Since the Ming dynasty's Yongle and Xuande feudal lords removed the feudal lords only had a few guards. How could they have a large army? However, this was not a problem for the three brothers. They asked people to use gold to make a treasure of the king, silver ornament Lingwu Marquis, Qinwu Marquis Seal 2, changed to Yuan Xuanwu. They also imitated the emperor's method and made many imperial edicts. Then they asked their subordinates Duan Yuhong, Mengnang, Chen Tianzai, and the others to use the seal coins and other things. Confer the title of Lingwu Marquis to Yang Wenba, the title of Lingwu Marquis to Tianzhai Miao Jinlong, and the title of Qinwu Marquis to Qinwu Marquis. At the same time, they sent people to contact the old king of Jiaoji, Li Li, and promised them great benefits. In history, Yang Wenba and the others were very clear-headed. When they saw the so-called imperial edicts from the Guangdong brothers, they did not take it seriously, let alone send troops for them. However, in this life, the Ming dynasty was divided into north and south. The power and strength of the imperial court were greatly reduced. In addition, this time, the three brothers worked together. Yang Wenba also had the idea to collude with them. The three brothers of the Min king had the support of several Miao leaders internally and the support of Jiaoji externally. When the general situation was formed, Yunnan was in chaos. When Yunnan was in chaos, the Mu family, as the biggest warlord, and also the one who had lived here for generations, became the only obstacle to the success of the Min king. It was still the same sentence. When the north and south were clearly separated, the Mu family was not even clear about who they should be loyal to. How could they rashly send troops to quell the chaos? Because of this delay, the Min king's forces grew stronger and stronger. In the end, even the Mu family could not eliminate them in a short period of time. At this time, the news spread to the southern Ming capital, Nanjing. Then, there was the matter of Ingzong sending troops to quell the chaos. Looking at the relevant information that was completely inconsistent with the development pattern in history, Yang Qindong, who was in a well-disguised deep pit, slowly turned off the flashing flashlight in his hand. The situation seemed to be getting more and more chaotic. Even the news from the military camp outside was not as encircling and intercepting as previously thought. On the contrary, it was all kinds of benefits. After knowing that Ming Ingzong Zhu Qizhen had adopted the strategy of the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Wang Ji, they would use quiet methods to deal with the mercenaries outside of Gaozhou. For example, they would surround them and not use their weapons. They would wait for them to run out of ammunition and food. This way, they would be able to control them at will until they were forced to withdraw from all of the southern Ming territory. In order to deal with such a situation, Yang Qindong had made preparations in advance. Not only did he send people out to purchase provisions, he also mobilized the Chong family and a few other large merchants in the south. The merchant families were all here to provide support when one side was in trouble. When the time came, with sufficient food, the situation in Yunnan would worsen. When Wang Ji's enlistment strategy completely failed, it would be time for him to return to the stage of history and show his strength. But who would have thought that the other party would actually believe him when he casually found an excuse of being sick? They even began to openly incite the excitement of defecting. According to the report from Beta Persei and Yang Wu, who stayed in the military camp, they had already gone to several dinner parties. They had heard so many compliments that their ears were about to grow calluses. Just enjoy the food and drink. Don't forget your true identity. This was Yang Qindong's reply to the two personal servants. From this sentence, it was not difficult to see that Yang Qindong was happy to see the situation in front of him. If possible, he wanted to continue like this until there was a change in Yunnan. All in all, the changes in the military camp were good things. At least there was no need to fall out. As for whether the other party could really tempt Beta Persei and Yang Wu to defect, Yang Qindong was not worried at all. Chapter 412. Both of them had been to Crimson City and had witnessed Xianxia's strength. They had been his personal retainers for such a long time. They had a bright future ahead of them. It would be foolish of them to betray him for the sake of a dream fabricated by someone else. If that was the case, it would be better for it to happen as soon as possible. Instead of waiting for someone to grow stronger, it would be better for a disloyal person to reveal his true colors as soon as possible. Of course, Beta Persei and Yang Qindong would definitely be able to pass the test. On this point, Yang Chendong was very confident. "Young master, there are people walking past us again. It seems like there are more than one squad. Should we attack?" Yang Chendong lowered his head and pondered about the environment he was facing. He wondered if there was anything he had not considered, and if there was a move he could take the initiative to make when Tiger's Mane's slightly agitated voice sounded in his ear. They were now in a deep pit. The top of the pit was covered with branches and leaves that could be used as camouflage. Unless one was a professional or was very close to the pit, it would be very difficult to discover such a trap. Yang Chendong had done this kind of concealment and camouflage countless times in his previous life. He was already very experienced in it. In fact, there were more than a dozen such traps in the forest. Tiger's Mane and the other 6 members of the first guard squad who followed Yang Chendong were in this pit. They were here to deal with the members of the Cold Vanguard team who passed by and eliminate them one by one. Yang Chendong's lips curled into a smile when he heard that someone had come to his pit. "Good. We must eat the fat meat that is in our mouth. We must let the members of the Cold Vanguard know that the slightest bit of carelessness can cost them their lives, especially in the forest where the environment is constantly changing. Just wait and see, young master." After receiving the order to attack, Tiger's Man's eyes flashed with excitement. Even though the bottom of the pit was pitch black, one could still see his eager expression. Not long after, a slight muffled groan came from outside the pit. Obviously, a one-sided slaughter was going on. Marquis Sheeping's residence. Reflected in front of him were 2 giant stone lions that were 4 meters tall. It was said that the most famous craftsmen in the country were invited to build them when the mansion was founded. After everything was over, the stone lion's eyes faintly emitted a deep light that could shake one's soul. Between the 2 stone lions, there was a tall and solemn door painted red. The door was inlaid with 7 horizontal lines and 7 vertical lines. There were a total of 49 white door nails, indicating the identity of the owner of the mansion. When he pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the courtyard, not only was it spacious, but the decorations were also exquisite and gorgeous. It could be said to be richly ornamented and splendid. It was even more luxurious than some of the great Ming dynasty's Zhou family residences. This was the Mu residence of the Marquis of Sheeping. It originated from Zhou Yuanzhang's adopted son, Mu Ying. Because of his bravery in battle, he repeatedly made contributions. In the 16th year of Hongwu, 1383, Marquis of Sheeping was enfeoffed in Yunnan and later promoted to Duke of Qin. From then on, the Mu family became the actual owner of Yunnan. Until now, the newly appointed Mu Bin took over the family's glory and mission, becoming the new Marquis of Sheeping and Duke of Qin. However, compared to the previous Marquis of Sheeping, Mu Bin not only encountered more problems, but they were also very big. For example, the current chaos caused him to be unable to sleep at night, and his food was tasteless. The reason was the 2 imperial edicts, one in the open and one in the dark. Needless to say, it was the imperial edict from the southern Ming dynasty's Zhou Qizhan, asking him to quell the chaos in Yunnan. The hidden edict was referring to the Baiming Emperor Zhu Qiu. The meaning of the secret edict was for him to recognize the situation and return to the great Ming dynasty's embrace as soon as possible. As for the Yunnan matter, he could watch with folded arms. When the chaos affected the retired emperor's foundation of governance, he could work together with Baiming to pacify the world. Since the great Ming dynasty was divided into 2, Mu Bin was in a difficult position. He didn't know who to listen to. As the Mu family who had protected the Zhou family for generations, they had never had any thoughts of rebellion. This was the case from the earliest Mu Ying. Even now, Mu Bin still had the same idea. However, the matter of 2 emperors in one country was really difficult for him. Moreover, from his point of view, it seemed that every one of them was orthodox and every one of them was not. Zhou Qizhan was originally the emperor of the great Ming dynasty. Although news of him was lost due to a crushing defeat on the battlefield, his identity as the emperor had always existed. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was orthodox. Zhu Qiu was appointed in the face of danger. After there was no news of the emperor of the great Ming dynasty, he succeeded as the emperor and played a very positive role in calming the hearts of the officials and the people. Moreover, he ascended the throne in the northern capital. There were ceremonies and laws. Could be said that it was orthodox. However, it was not. When Zhu Qizhen returned after his defeat, he should have gone directly to the capital. However, he did not have the courage to do so. Instead, he went to Nanjing to establish the southern Ming dynasty. This seemed to be somewhat unorthodox and even had the intention of splitting the great Ming dynasty. Zhu Qiu was even more so. His emperor position was originally a stopgap measure. Logically speaking, when he knew that Zhu Qizhen was fine, he should have taken the initiative to give up the throne. However, he did not. Instead, he continued to sit on this somewhat illegitimate emperor position. It did not seem to be an orthodox thing to do. These two emperors were both right and wrong. It was difficult for Mu Bin. It was precisely this difficulty that made the situation in Yunnan worse and worse. Even if he wanted to go all out now, he was afraid that he would not be able to solve the problem. In war, the most taboo thing was that the commander's will was not firm enough. This kind of thing happened to Mu Bin. Even the commander was like this, let alone the soldiers. They did not know who to listen to, so much so that in the later stages they did not know who to fight for. They did not even know why. It would be strange if they could fight this battle well. Even Mu Bin could not believe it. Because his will was always wavering and his will was not firm enough on the battlefield, the enemy took advantage of the loophole. Now that things had reached this stage, he could only stay in a corner and wait for changes. It was at this time that Ing Zong's special envoy arrived. It was Wang Ji, the left assistant minister who acted as the minister of war. According to his suggestion to Ing Zong, he was now splitting his troops into 3 ways to solve the problem. The first way was to form a marriage alliance with Jiaoji. The second way was for the Mu clan to be crowned as king. The third way was to bribe the Miao clan army with a large sum of money. The first way was long and the third way was full of danger. In the end, Wang Ji himself chose the safe and dignified second way, which was to come to the Mu clan and act as a lobbyist. In exchange for Mu Bin's position as king, the Mu clan would send troops to quell the chaos in Yunnan. Mu Bin naturally did not dare to neglect Wang Ji's arrival. Although he had a large number of troops in his hands and had a high influence in Yunnan, he had to be careful. The reason why the Mu clan could continue to this day and hold military power without being suspected by others was because they were cautious and careful. Usually, if a random 5th-rank official of the imperial court came to the Mu clan, he would personally receive him, not to mention a 3rd-rank official who was very likely to become a 2nd-rank minister. In the Mu clan's main hall, the handsome Mu Bin saw Wang Ji, who was wearing a 2nd-rank official's robe and had a humble appearance. The two sides first greeted each other politely, then they sat down and looked at each other face to face. Wang Ji was still a little unfamiliar with Mu Bin. As for his father, Mu Chang, who had just passed away, had some dealings with him. Since they wanted to talk about things, according to the Chinese's habit, they naturally had to start with a friendly relationship. Wang Ji then talked about some of his and Mu Cheng's past. When someone talked about his father in front of him, Mu Bin naturally listened with a respectful expression. From time to time, a smile would appear on his face to show his respect. Wang Ji was very satisfied with Mu Bin's performance. As they talked, the topic was naturally related to the current situation. Back then, when old Duke Muqing was still alive, Emperor Ingzong had praised him more than once. He said that old Duke Muqing had a noble character, was loyal to the country, and fought bravely. He had won the emperor's heart. When he heard the news of old Duke's death, he was really sad for a few days. Now that I think about it, everything seems to have happened yesterday. How nostalgic. Many thanks for His Majesty's love for Father. If Father knew in the underworld, he would be happy and comforted. Mu Bin stood up and cupped his fists toward the south to show his respect. Mu Marquis is too polite. Not only is His Majesty very respectful to old Duke, but he also values Mu Marquis very much. He has told this subject more than once that although Mu Marquis is young, you do have the demeanor of old Duke. Moreover, you are young and strong, so you should be able to create more achievements comparable to your ancestors. It is because of this that His Majesty has decided to abolish the policy of not being able to confer the title of king. Mu Bin, please accept the imperial edict." As he spoke, Wang Ji's expression became extremely solemn. In the end, he even took the initiative to stand up. Unknowingly, a golden imperial edict with a dragon pattern on the back appeared in his hand. This subject, Mu Bin, accepts the imperial edict. In the face of the imperial edict, whether it was from Yingzong or Daizong, Mu Bin had no reason to object. All he could do was kneel and accept the title. By the will of heaven, His Majesty, the imperial edict says, Marquis Mu Bin of Shiping is young and promising, loyal to his country, and has outstanding military achievements. Today, to thank the Mu family for their outstanding contributions to the great Ming dynasty, I hereby confer Marquis Mu Bin of Shiping as the King of Shiping and award him with a gold medal. For generations, except for the first Marquis Mu Ying, the other Marquis of Shiping were all Marquis when they were alive. Only when they died could they be conferred the title of Duke of Qian. This had become a tradition. However, when it came to Mu Bin, he was conferred the title of King of Shiping without doing anything. Although it was only for this term, it was not hereditary. It was not an exaggeration to say that this action brought honor to his ancestors. Chapter 413. Mu Bin's face was filled with excitement when he heard the imperial edict. He knelt on the ground with his hands flat and shouted, "Long live the emperor! King of Shiping, please get up." After reading the imperial edict, Wang Ji put on a more enthusiastic expression and carefully helped Mu Bin, who was kneeling on the ground. "Thank you, Lord Wang," Mu Bin said carefully. "You're too polite, King of Shiping. You'll be the first king of Great Ming Dynasty with a different surname. I'm afraid I'll need your help in many areas in the future," Wang Ji said deliberately. At the same time, he was also trying to be friendly. Mu Bin had the idea that one more friend meant one more path. Besides, he had to have an important official that he was on good terms with in Jingdo. Only then could information flow smoothly and make better and more correct decisions on certain matters. Now that he felt Wang Ji's enthusiasm, he replied politely, "You're too polite, Lord Wang. In fact, Marquis, I've always respected you, Lord Wang." Changing the title from Marquis to King meant that Mu Bin had accepted the title. Wang Ji, who was reading the imperial edict, could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He was worried that Mu Bin would not accept the imperial edict. If that was the case, it would be even more difficult to count on him to help in the Yunnan matter. Fortunately, Mu Bin accepted the edict gladly. Then, everything could be discussed. Well said, well said. We'll help each other in the future. Haha. Wang Ji smiled and took the opportunity to grab Mu Bin's arm. Then, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then they burst out laughing. Their relationship became much closer in an instant with this smile. When they talked later, they had fewer scruples. Taking this opportunity, Wang Ji finally told Mu Bin about his edict, including some analysis of Mu Bin's situation. "King of Shiping, to tell you the truth, I'm the one who proposed to be conferred the title of king. The reason why I did this is because you didn't show much enthusiasm in the matter of Yunnan, which has already disappointed His Majesty." Wang Ji spoke in a sincere and heartfelt manner. He even intentionally sighed. Things aren't like that. I do have some misgivings about the Yunnan matter, but overall I still did my best." When Mu Bin heard that his actions had caused Yingzong to be dissatisfied, his face was filled with fear as he tried to explain himself. Looking at Mu Bin's reaction, Wang Ji laughed in his heart. As expected, Mu Bin had his concerns. However, on the surface, he still analyzed the situation seriously. "King of Shiping, you don't have to say much. I can guess what you're worried about and who's behind it. Forgive me for saying something disrespectful, but you've made the wrong choice." "Wrong?" Mu Bin asked doubtfully. "Wrong? You are indeed wrong." Wang Ji nodded heavily. Yingzong has always been on the throne, and the one in the north is just borrowing the power of others to rise to power. However, in terms of methods and strength, although the age difference is not that big, the actual difference is too great. For example, there were many old officials in the north who were still contacting the emperor, expressing that they had no choice but to lower their heads due to the circumstances. Once the emperor could lead the army to the north one day, They would definitely support each other from afar to show their loyalty. The emperor has been preparing for this. If it weren't for the chaos in Yunnan and Guangdong, this matter would have been done by now. Is there such a thing? Mu Bin said as if this was the first time he heard about it. Of course there is. To tell you the truth, those people who are secretly contacting the emperor are all people with great power and military power. If it's possible, I'm afraid that once the emperor starts a rebellion, the one in the north will be captured without putting up a fight. I'm afraid that there won't be many soldiers left. Think about it, the emperor has been the emperor in the north for more than 10 years. How could he not arrange for people to be there? The emperor's methods are not something that we can guess or see through. At this time, Wang Ji praised Zhu Qizhen with an unfathomable look. Hearing all this, Mu Bin couldn't help but nod. If what Wang Ji said was true, Yingzong's chances of winning were indeed higher. If that was the case, he would have to bet on it. Or rather, he should have a decision in his heart. What is a decision? When others have not made up their minds, you have already made up your mind and taken action. That is a decision. Otherwise, when the general trend is set, no matter what you do, it will be the icing on the cake. Now that Mu Bin was crowned as a prince with a different surname, he had already received practical benefits. If he didn't do anything, he was afraid that he would be laughed at by the world. At this moment, he made up his mind and said to Wang Ji, "Lord Wang, please rest assured. Please tell the emperor that this prince's sincerity has always been on this side. In a while, I will go and announce the general's camp and prepare to deal a heavy blow to the rebels in the territory and show the prestige of the great Ming Empire." Good. Seeing that Mu Bin had agreed so readily, Wang Ji was naturally excited. He laughed heartily and kept patting Mu Bin's arm. "Ping Shi Wang, your decisiveness really didn't disappoint people. It can be seen that you must be a person who can do great things. Your future is limitless. In the future, the Mu family will also have good fortune because of you. This prince is only loyal to the emperor. All this is what I should do." Since he made the final decision, Mu Bin's heart that had been wavering left and right was put down. At this moment, he only had one goal in his heart, and that was to be worthy of the emperor's trust. He would take the opportunity to stabilize the position of Ping Shi Wang and bring good fortune to the Mu family. Not long after, the army belonging to the Mu family moved. 100,000 troops were ready for battle, causing the entire Yunnan to be shaken. Everywhere was filled with murderous intent. Wang Ji's road was successful, but the other two roads were not so smooth. Although the envoys sent to the Miao family promised a lot of money, the opinions of the Miao family leaders were not unified. It was difficult to reach a conclusion in a short time. Although the envoys on the way to Jiaoji successfully met the old emperor of Jiaoji, King Li, in history this person died, but for the sake of the story he is still alive, still alive. Dear officials, please don't scold him as a prodigal son. Thank you for your understanding. The other party seemed to be satisfied with the so-called marriage alliance, but they had different opinions on which princess to marry. According to Zhu Qizhen's arrangement, this time, the other party was given the daughter of a foreign prince, who was temporarily conferred the title of princess. Although such a person also had the blood of the Zhu family, it was not very pure and her status was not very high. King Li was well aware of this point. Since he wanted to marry, he naturally hoped to find a princess with a pure bloodline and noble status to be his wife. Thus, he put forward his own request. That was, the marriage was fine, but he had to marry the third princess of the Southern Ming Empire. The third princess of the Southern Ming Empire was Zhu Qizhen's younger sister. During her birthday, Yang Chendong had even arranged a program for her. Because of her status, she was very noble. Later on, after Zhu Qizhen's army was defeated, although Daizong Zhu Qiyu tried to persuade her to stay, she still followed Zhu Qizhen to Nanjing. Because of this, the matter of finding Fu Ma was delayed. Now, she was a girl waiting to be married. Since Li knew about this matter, it was natural for him to have such a request. The other party wanted to marry the third princess, so the envoy did not dare to make a decision. He only said that he would return to the capital of the Southern Ming Empire and report to Daizong Yingzong. As if to put pressure on the other party, Li clamored for the envoy to quickly reply. Otherwise, he was not sure if he would send troops again in a fit of anger and occupy the entire Yunnan. At that time, it would be hard to avoid hurting the relationship between the two sides. The envoy was so scared that he ran out of the Jiaoji army's camp in a panic. He took a detour and headed straight for Nanjing. However, what he and everyone else did not expect was that the Security Bureau had already made arrangements to deal with this envoy. Not long after the envoy entered the Jiaoji army's camp, the assassination attempt was carried out. The envoy was completely unprepared and was killed, along with the dozens of people who followed him. Envoys being killed, this kind of thing usually did not happen. As the saying goes, even if two armies were at war, they would not kill the envoys. It was precisely because of this fixed way of thinking that no one would expect such a thing to happen. As a result, the envoy was only discovered after he disappeared for a few days. At that moment, rumors started to spread. It was said that King Li had asked Ingzong for two women. One was the most noble and pure-blooded third princess, Princess Xianxia, and the other was Zhu Qizhen's current wife, Empress Qian. It was also said that the old king preferred married women. This news was naturally spread by the Security Bureau on purpose. Because the envoy was already dead, the truth of the matter could no longer be investigated. Once such rumors were heard, the news immediately spread to the capital of Nanjing. One could imagine how angry Zhu Qizhen would be when he heard the news. Who knew how many tables he would overturn and how many things he would break because of this? The third Princess Xianxia was already his flesh and blood. They had the same father and mother. How could such a biological sister marry an old man who was almost 60 years old? If he really did that, how could he face his ancestors after 100 years? Not to mention, the other party even said that he wanted his empress. This was a blatant slap to his face. If it were any other man, they would not be able to accept it. Although it was popular in some places to send women to do errands, especially in Japan, this kind of thing could be said to be common. However, Lady Qian was the empress of a country. Similarly, she represented the face of a country. If Zhu Qizhen really did that, he would not need to do anything else. The whole world would look down on him. Then, where would his imperial power be? Where would his dignity be? In his anger, Zhu Qizhen unleashed a thunderous rage in the imperial court. I order Governor Wang Lai of Huguang, Administrative Secretary Yang Xinmin of Yunnan, and Governor Tongji Dongxing to immediately mobilize the army and attack Jiaoji together with King Shiping. I want him to pay the price for his arrogance and ignorance. Pay the price. The emperor was furious. Immediately, a eunuch went down to pass down the decree. However, all the officials in the imperial court knew that if Jiaoji was so easy to destroy, it would have been destroyed long ago. There would not have been Xuanzong Zhu Zhanji's abandonment back then. Chapter 414. Thinking back to when Great Ming was just established, Zhu Di was really prosperous and sent troops to conquer Jiaoji, modern-day Vietnam. At that time, the one leading the troops was the late Duke Ing Zhangfu. With the strength of the Ming army, they defeated them and established Jiaoji province. However, as both sides were too far apart, many things were beyond their reach. In 1431 AD, Jiaoji province was abolished and Li accepted the Ming dynasty title, becoming the king of Annan. This was a huge blow to the prestige of the central government toward the southwest chieftains. What happened after proved that the negative effects of Xian De abandoning Jiaoji were long-term and fatal. This matter dealt a heavy blow to the Ming dynasty's international prestige in the western region and shook their suzerain status. Losing Annan meant losing the western region. This was something that even Zhu Zhanji did not expect. Since then, Annan had been harassing the border and invading the land. Finally, there was today's humiliation. Zhu Qizhen was still angry as he left court. Beside him was eunuch Chao Jixiang, who looked like he wanted to say something. Chao Jixiang, what's the matter? Noticing the change in Chao Jixiang, Zhu Qizhen stopped and asked with a frown. Even if I die 1,000 times, I will not say anything. However, I am afraid that I will make the emperor angry. When Chao Jixiang heard Zhu Qizhen's question, he knelt on the ground, his face filled with fear. As long as it is for the good of the country and for me, Chao Jixiang can just say it directly. I can forgive you. Zhu Qizhan had a good impression of this eunuch who seemed to be loyal and devoted to him. At least this eunuch was wholeheartedly loyal to him and did things wholeheartedly for him. He was much better than some officials who only knew how to fight for power and profit. He was also more reassuring. Hearing that he was not guilty, Chao Jixiang kowtowed to the ground and said, Your Majesty, this subject believes that the Yunnan matter is not unsolvable. The reason why the progress of the various armies is slow and they have not achieved victory is because the generals at the front are afraid of the enemy. As they say, the emperor is far away and there is no one to supervise them. Is an imperial decree not enough for them to go all out? This subject requests to send an army supervisor to the front lines to put pressure on them. This way, it would be equivalent to His Majesty having an extra pair of eyes watching them. With His Majesty keeping an eye on them, there would be no need to worry about them not doing their best and not risking their lives. Finally understanding the meaning of Chao Jixiang's words, Zhu Qizhan's brows furrowed deeply. Minister Chao means to send eunuchs to the front lines to supervise the troops? This official is not afraid. The people sent can be arranged to be Your Majesty's trusted subordinates. This official will not say anything more about this matter. Chao Jixiang did not admit nor deny. He was afraid that his suggestion would give Zhong the impression that he wanted to seize power and meddle in the military. So he didn't dare to say anything. Originally, the Ming dynasty had a system of inspecting the army. Every time there was a war, eunuchs would be sent over. On the surface, it was to supervise the army, but in reality, it was to watch over the generals for the emperor and report their performance in the form of secret memorials. Reality proved that, with eunuchs supervising the army, the generals at the front lines did not dare to be negligent. Some even purposely showed a very brave appearance in order to gain the favor of the eunuchs. It was so that their names could be passed to the emperor's ears, and then their future would be limitless. However, ever since the defeat of Tumu, for the sake of Zhong's reputation, everyone put the blame on Wang Jin. There were even people who said that war was not a game. How could there be an outsider guiding an expert? It was also from then on that the idea of eunuchs supervising the army was rejected. This also caused the entire group of eunuchs to revolve around the emperor. Otherwise, without military power, they could be removed and replaced at any time. For the sake of supervising the army, for the sake of seizing military power, these eunuch leaders had thought of ways to solve this problem more than once. However, with Wang Zhen's example as an example, it was extremely difficult for them to change their minds. And now, the opportunity seemed to have come. Zhu Qizhan's dissatisfaction with the situation in Yunnan allowed Chao Jixiang, who was following beside him, to see an opportunity. Chao Jixiang was completely dedicated to the country and the people, and this moved Zhu Qizhan. He had also felt that the imperial power did not seem to have enough control over the war in Yunnan. It was not that he had not thought of sending eunuchs to supervise the army. Although there was a drawback of an outsider guiding an expert, it was undeniable that with eunuchs at the front lines, the imperial power would be able to reach the army, and it would be better for the army to fight bravely. In the past, it was because of Wang Zhen's influence and the obstruction of the officials that he had no choice but to stop the example of eunuchs supervising the army. However, now that Jiaoji was so rampant, no one would say anything if he proposed to send eunuchs to supervise the army. What? The other party wanted the empress to be his wife. Could it be that the emperor was not allowed to retaliate? Good. Great companion's loyalty to the country is exemplary. Since that is the case, I order Chen Liang to be the eunuch supervising the army in Yunnan. He will supervise the generals on the battlefield and kill the enemy bravely. Those who disobey will be punished according to the law. Zhu Qizhan finally opened his mouth and personally mentioned Chen Liang's name. Chao Jixiang was not surprised by this and kowtowed to the ground again. Your Majesty is wise. Long live the emperor. Who was Chen Liang? He was the nephew of the great eunuch, Chen Sangbao. Chen Sangbao recalled that when he was outside the Yang family in Baiming, he was someone who had wrestled with Jining. He was also an old official of Ingzong. Later, he followed the other officials to Nanjing. However, due to Wang Zhen's influence, he had been very low-key recently. Lying low was equivalent to waiting for an opportunity. Now that the opportunity had finally arrived, he could finally soar into the sky. It seemed that Qian Liang was Qian Sengbeo's man and seemed to have some disagreements with Chao Jixiang. However, that was just for outsiders to see. In fact, since coming to Nanjing, these eunuchs had been unusually united. Perhaps they also knew that if they did not do this, they would not have a chance to stand out. Therefore, on the surface, they did not see eye to eye with each other. But their relationship was very good in secret. This time, Chao Jixiang made a suggestion. He had never thought of sending his own people to supervise the army. He only needed eunuchs to go, and it was equivalent to achieving his goal. As for who the eunuchs were, it could be considered a close relationship with him. Zhu Qizhen's imperial edict was sent out. Qian Liang also led a group of genie guards out of the capital and went straight to Nanjing. This scene was seen by many of the officials, but this time, no one spoke out in opposition. If there was someone to blame the king of Jiaoji for speaking too arrogantly. If there was someone to blame the eunuchs for choosing such a good opportunity to stand out. It was so good that the officials could not resist. In the Kuang residence in the capital, Kuang Yi, who had been ordered to recuperate at home, could not leave the residence or go to the court to meet the emperor. However, his position as the Minister of War did not change. There would be people who would immediately inform him of the big and small matters that happened in the court. When he learned that the emperor had sent eunuchs to supervise the army in Yunnan, Kuang Yi sighed. Has the emperor already forgotten about Wang Zhen's future troubles? Does he not know that doing this will only make the situation worse? After the long sigh, Kuang Yi could not help but think of Yang Qindong's appearance. After being the Minister of War for so many years, Kuang Yi was someone who understood the military. The situation in Yunnan was complicated and chaotic. How could sending eunuchs to supervise the army solve the problem? If these eunuchs went, not only would they not be of help, but they would also make the situation more chaotic. Then who would solve the problem there in the end? It seemed that it should be placed on Yang Qindong. As for how to deal with Yang Qindong, it was only after Kuang Yi returned to his residence that the imperial court made the decision. It was like the birds were gone, and the bough was hidden. However, the problem was that there were still birds, and there were many of them. He did not understand why Emperor Ingzong was so anxious to hide Yang Qindong. However, now that it had become a reality, what he needed to do was to change the result, and not to find out the reason. Come, get the brush, paper, and inkstone. I want to write a letter to Guaning. Che Li, the temporary location of the Min Prince's residence. Che Li was the Che Li Xianxia, located in the southeast suburb of Jinghong City, Yunnan. This was the place chosen by the Min Prince before he announced his independence. Because of the complicated terrain and the fact that it was far from the central plains, it was chosen as the new place to rise. This was the place where the Minzhuang was originally the king of foreign affairs. At this time, it was heavily guarded both inside and outside. Men with swords and spears could be seen everywhere to ensure that, without the red flag, even a fly could not fly into the courtyard. However, in such a heavily guarded place, a young master in his 20s, wearing a soft gauze tang headscarf, wearing a purple embroidered robe, holding a white paper folding fan in his hand, with a slender body and a jade-like face. He walked gracefully, smiling before speaking, with an elegant and noble temperament, as if he was taking a stroll in a courtyard. From time to time, he would look around, as if he was looking for the beautiful scenery in the courtyard. All the guards acted as if they did not see this young master's appearance. No matter where his gaze fell, it was as if it was a matter of course. Young Master Yao, why did you come here? We have been looking for you for a long time. Two anxious maids came to the front of the young master, panting as they spoke, as if they were complaining about something. Haha! Thank you for your hard work. Is the princess looking for me? There was a faint smile on the young master's face. Just this smile alone gave people the feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Yes, the princess has prepared a new song. She is just waiting for young Master Yao to appreciate it together. The two maids kept nodding. After saying this, they pulled the young man's arms and walked straight to another courtyard. This young Master Yao still maintained a smile on his face and allowed the two girls to pull him. However, deep in the corner of his eyes, there was a faint killing intent. He was currently memorizing every scene in the courtyard, including how many guards there were, where they were distributed, and so on. Chapter 4:15. Young Master Yao's surname was Yao and his given name was Ingjun. As a matter of fact, he was as handsome as his name suggested. His appearance belonged to the sunny and energetic type of man. In modern terms, he was the type of fresh meat. He had big eyes and a fair complexion. Many women's complexions were far inferior to his. When such a man appeared, he would often receive the attention of those women. However, what everyone did not know was that Yao Ingjun had another identity. He was the ace spy of the Xianxia Security Bureau. This time, he came to King Min's territory to infiltrate the enemy's territory and obtain inside information. However, he did not expect that the moment he appeared in the Chirizi Bureau, King Min's sister, Zhu Lian, fell in love with him at first sight because of his extraordinary charm and temperament. This woman, who was given the title of Forever Victory Group leader, fell in love with him at first sight. Thus, she invited Yao Ingjun to her home. Naturally, Yao Ingjun was eager to see this happen. In this way, he would become a frequent visitor to the prince's mansion, so much so that all the guards here knew him. In addition, Princess Yongxing had previously instructed everyone to be as polite to young Master Yao as they were to her. Thus, she could walk around the mansion at any time without any restrictions. As Yao Ingjun followed the two maidservants to Princess Yongxing's courtyard, he said politely and casually, "It's strange. Why is the courtyard so quiet today?" "Young Master Yao, you don't know. Several princes have gone to the army camp. It seems that the situation at the front line is a little tense." "Yes, I also heard about it. But no matter what, it doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with us women. Also, young Master Yao, although you are a man, you have a good appearance. As long as you please our princess, you will be able to live a life of luxury." The two maidservants talked one after another. When they saw Yao Ingjun's gaze on them, they could not help but smile shyly. It was clear that his good looks had not only deeply attracted Princess Yongxing, but even these maidservants were also greatly attracted to him. Yao Ingjun was very annoyed when others said that he had a good appearance. However, in order to complete the task, he did not show it on the surface. In fact, he was already thinking about the content of the meeting in the army camp. As King Min Zhuang's most beloved sister, it should not be difficult to know. How could he get the information from it? 5 miles away from Min King's mansion, in the military camp, King Min Zhuang Zhu Huilu, King Guangtong Zhu Huilu, and King Yangzong Zhu Huilu were holding a military meeting with their subordinates. The three sons of Zhu had some ability. At the very least, they still had some talented people under them. It was because of the operation of these people that they were able to reach their current scale and become an existence that gave Huang Zong and Zhu Qizhen headaches. These so-called talents included Duan Yuhong, who was good at strange skills, Meng Nang, who was brave and good at fighting, Chen Tian, who was good at talking, and Yu Libin, who was good at reading people's faces and knew some supernatural skills. It was the existence of these talents that made the situation in Yunnan more and more chaotic. They also formed a temporary alliance with Zhaoji and Miao Jun, and forced the Mu family to not dare to act rashly. Originally, if this situation continued, it would not take long for the southern Ming army to fall into a completely passive state. Then the entire Yunnan might fall. Then the war would expand outward, and they would achieve the general trend of occupying a corner of the world. Finally, they would seek the Central Plains and seize the world. However, after Mu Bin was crowned as the king of Shiping, the situation of the war changed accordingly. Is Ing Zong crazy? Since when can a person with a different surname be crowned as a king? Will the world still belong to our Zhu family? King Yangzong Zhu, who was the most impatient and the youngest among the three brothers, could not help but complain. With regards to Ing Zong's decision, which one of them could understand? In their opinion, even if the world was taken over by them in the future, it would still be ruled by the Zhu clan. As the saying goes, the meat will rot in the pot. But now that a person with a different surname could be crowned as a king, there were more variables. Okay, now is not the time to talk about this. Let's think about what to do next. Mu Bin, who has been crowned as a king, will not be able to wait and see like before. Soon he will make a big move. How should we deal with it? That's the big thing that we need to discuss. King Minzhuangzhu, who was also the leader of the group, said at this moment. Then, his gaze fell on King Guangtong, Zhu Huihua, and said, "Second brother, you should tell us what to do next." Okay. Zhu Huichen nodded at Zhu Huichen, then glanced at the crowd and said slowly, "Mu Bin has been conferred the title of King of Sheeping. Even if it's just for this title, he must be our enemy. Previously, we fantasized about joining forces with him and even promised to give him a share of the world. We must change our plans." Fortunately, the negotiations with Jiaoji fell apart. I don't know who helped us a lot, but they actually killed the envoy sent by Ying Zong. When Zhu Huihua said this, everyone sneered. Obviously, everyone had the same opinion about this matter. That was, it should be King Lily of Jiaoji who sent people, but the other party did not admit it. In addition, they were allies now, so there was no need to ask the other party to admit anything. The Jiaoji kingdom will not retreat. Instead, they have been forced into a corner. Next, we can discuss how to deal with King Shiping's army together. I think it will be difficult for anyone to gain any advantage in a short time. As for how to deal with the army of the Southern Ming dynasty, we still need to discuss a countermeasure. When Zhu Huihua said this, his gaze naturally fell on Duan Yuhong, who was standing below. Duan Yuhong was famous for his strange skills in Yunnan. This person had foresight and considered the future. He had the talent of a military advisor. Now that Zhu Huihua was asking for his opinion, he stepped forward. 3 princes, the army of the Southern Ming dynasty, is actually not difficult to deal with. When the 3 princes heard such confident words, they could not help but feel their eyes light up. They quietly waited for the next words to appear. 3 princes, it was still difficult to deal with the army of the imperial court. They always shrank and did not advance. Even if we wanted to take advantage of them, it would be difficult. However, it is different now. The Southern Ming Emperor has sent a eunuch to supervise the army. This is our opportunity. As long as we can reveal a certain flaw, I think that even if the generals of the imperial court do not want to, the eunuch in charge of the army will force them to take action. As such, as long as the plan is right, it will not be difficult to severely injure them. If we have the support of the Miao family, perhaps the situation of the entire Yunnan can be settled after this battle. Duan Yuhong's face was full of smiles. It had to be said that his move from the military supervisor's body was a brilliant move. Good. Ha. After Zhu Huihua heard this, he laughed loudly. Then this matter will be handed over to Duan Yuhong. Everyone else must give their full cooperation. As for persuading the Miao family to participate in the battle, it will be handed over to Chen Tian. There should be no problem. The eloquent Chen Tian nodded and said, 3 princes, please be at ease. This subject will do his best to facilitate this matter. Haha, good. Next, we must work together. In the future, once we have success, everyone here will have merit in supporting the emperor. You will all be great meritorious officials. You will all be bestowed with titles and wives. After the matter was resolved, Zhu Huihua, who was in a good mood, laughed loudly in the hall. The situation of Yunnan became more and more clear after Yingzong was bestowed the title of prince. There was a clear change in the attitude of all sides. When all of this reached the ears of Yang Chendong, who was still training in the forest, he could not help but sigh. In that case, everything will be over soon. It won't be long before someone remembers us. At that time, we will see how we sweep the world. Saying such bold words was not only because of Yang Chendong's confidence in the Yang family army, but also because he saw the weakness of his opponent, mutual distrust and serious internal friction. How could all of this be compared to the Yang faction, which was developing at a high speed and was united as one? War was more about the hearts of the people. Yang Chendong, who had grasped the heart of the people, had the weapon given to him by Datsang. What else could he be afraid of? As Yang Chundong waited, Shiping Wang Mubin made the first move. Different from the previous probing attacks, this time, Mubin personally led 30,000 vanguard troops and headed straight for Kelisai. However, halfway there, they were intercepted by the Jiaoji army and the army gathered by the three brothers of King Min. According to the previously discussed plan, Shiping Wang sent out his troops, followed by the southern Ming army in Yunnan. They were led by Dong Xing, who led 80,000 troops and headed straight for Kelisai. Perhaps it was because the king of Min's army had gone to stop the king of Shiping's army, so they made rapid progress. They had originally planned to take 7 days to reach the Cheli agency, but they had already covered 3/4 of the distance on the third day. Dong Xing, who led the troops, thought that King Min's army was not strong enough and underestimated the enemy. Coupled with the constant urging of the military supervisor, Qian Liang, out of pride, he did not care that the middle and rear troops were still on their way. He did not care about the drawbacks of lengthening the battle line and led 20,000 vanguard troops straight to Kelisai. However, just as they were about to reach Kelisai, 100,000 Miao troops suddenly appeared, together with 50,000 King Min's troops. With so many enemies appearing like landslides and tsunamis, they rushed into the army of the southern Ming Empire. It was as if a river had flooded the land, drowning the 20,000-strong army. Not only that, even the military governor, Dong Xing, was killed in the chaos. Chapter 4:16. 20,000 vanguards were destroyed, and what followed was a crushing defeat. Nearly half of the remaining 60,000 soldiers were killed or captured, and the other half of them had fled. Only Qian Liang, the supervisor of the army, returned to Guangnan Prefecture with 15,000 generals and barely survived the battle. When the news of the defeat of the southern Ming army reached King Mubin of Shiping, he hurriedly brought his army back to Yunnan Prefecture for fear of falling into a trap. The loss of this battle caused the elite troops that the southern Ming Empire had placed in Yunnan to be completely lost. Their strength had also dropped by close to half. At this moment, King Min, Jiaoji, and Miao Jun's counterattack arrived. They first sent a part of the army to monitor King Shiping in Yunnan Prefecture, and then gathered the main force to surround Guangnan Prefecture. Without any preparation, the South Ming army in Guangnan Prefecture retreated in a flurry in order to avoid being besieged. Besides abandoning Guangnan Prefecture, they even left most of the grains and fodder in the city for the sake of Prince Min's troops who had caught up with them. After abandoning Guangnan Prefecture, they planned to march to Guangxi Prefecture to meet up with King Shiping's army. However, they dared not trust anyone. Fearing that King Shiping would stab them in the back, Governor Wang Lai of Huguang proposed that the newly appointed Administrative Secretary of Yunnan and the former Administrative Secretary of Guangdong, Yang Xinmin, and Army Supervisor Qian Liang both agreed. The army left Yunnan and headed toward Guangxi's Xiqing Prefecture. But who would have thought that, without enough communication in advance, the Guangxi army was not prepared enough, causing the army to advance too slowly. Not long after the army entered Xiqing Prefecture, they found the king of Min's troops chasing from behind. After a night in Xiqing Province, the army continued to retreat to the east. They passed through Qingyuan Prefecture, Guilin Prefecture, Guangxi Prefecture, Shaozhou Prefecture in Guangdong, and finally arrived at Ganzhou Prefecture in Jiangxi Province. A few months ago, it was here that Yang Chundong met up with the remaining 10,000 soldiers in Guangdong and solved the rebellion of the Yellow Bandits in Guangdong. However, who would have thought that Wang Lai and his army would also retreat to this place in such a short time? After losing most of the cities in Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong, the southern Ming army finally settled down. King of Min's troops did not chase after them. Instead, they began to digest the land and cities they had just obtained. Because this place was jointly attacked by the Min King, Jiaoji, and Miao people, they still needed to discuss the division of the city. This gave the southern Ming army a chance to catch their breath. But at the same time, it had to be said that after most of the three provinces were occupied, the three armies formed by the Min King's faction also revealed their true nature. They burned, killed, and pillaged everywhere. For a time, the people of the 3 provinces had no way to make a living. Many big families were robbed. Many people were displaced. They did not have clothes to wear and food to fill their stomachs. The news of the army's defeat spread like a gust of wind to the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. When Zhu Qizhen, who was in the main hall of the palace, heard the news, he fainted on the spot. Not long after, important officials and generals came to the palace. To everyone's surprise, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, who had been ordered to recuperate at home a while ago, was also present. Kuang Yi stood in the imperial court without the slightest hint of illness, but his ashen face told everyone that he was in an extremely bad mood. It was not just Kuang Yi. There was probably no one in the imperial court who was in a good mood. 1/3 of these officials were important officials in the capital of the northern Ming dynasty. They had come to Nanjing because they trusted Zhu Qizhen. They had originally thought that they would first establish the southern Ming dynasty with Yingzong. Then, after working hard, they would counterattack Baiming and unify the great Ming dynasty. At that time, they would all have the merit of supporting the emperor, and it would not be impossible for them to be recorded in the annals of history. Who would have thought that 2 seemingly insignificant civil conflicts in the south would lead to such a consequence? The southern Ming Empire had lost 3 provinces in a row. If it wasn't contained, it wouldn't be long before the entire southern Ming Empire would cease to exist. At that time, let alone returning to the capital, it would be hard to say whether or not they would be able to keep their lives. The sudden turn of events and the terrible situation left everyone speechless. The civil and military officials arrived one after another. Then, they all imitated Kuang Ye's gloomy expression, looking very unsightly. The officials were silent, which was a rare occurrence. The head eunuch, Chao Jixiang, broke the silence with his horsetail whisk. The moment he appeared, the commotion attracted everyone's attention. Chao Jixiang's expression was also not good. He first swept his gaze across the officials, and when he saw that everyone was present, he sighed in relief and said, "The emperor has decreed that Kuang Yi, Wang Zue, Chun Sun, Xiao Xian, and Shang Lu are to wait in the inner hall. This official obeys." Kuang Yi and the other 4 hurriedly bowed and cupped their fists. Then they followed behind Chao Jixiang and left the throne room. When the 5 of them left, the other officials looked at each other. For a moment, they did not know whether to leave or not. Some of the officials looked at the Minister of Rights, Lu De, and the Minister of Works, Zhang Yuan. Of the 6 ministers, only the 2 of them were left behind. It was inevitable that they would be looked at. In particular, the Minister of Rights, Lu De, left behind many doubtful gazes. Zhang Yuan was the Minister of Works. He could not play a big role in the war. At most, he could supervise the forging of weapons. However, it was said that he had already forged many usable weapons a while ago. They could be used by the army at any time. As a result, the effect he could play was very small. Lu De was different. He was the Minister of Rights. War was not as simple as fighting. There were more negotiations and public opinion. These were all done by the Ministry of Rights. But now he was indeed left here. Thinking back to the fact that it was because of his advice that Minister Kuang Yi had to return home to recuperate, which led to the defeat of the war, everyone couldn't help but look at him with many more question marks. Lu De naturally felt this. He also knew that the emperor needed to find a scapegoat for the defeat of the front line. Although it might not be him, the appropriate punishment was always needed. The fact that he did not wait for the emperor's arrival was a clear proof. However, even though he knew this, Lu De still stood there without showing the slightest trace of fear. He knew these courtiers too well. Once you were in power, you could say all kinds of sweet words, even mushy ones, out of your mouth. On the other hand, once you've lost your power, you'll be able to say all sorts of nasty things. In the main hall, Lu De, who was standing there, was suffering. Inside the hall, Zhu Qizhen, who had returned to normal, was sitting on the golden dragon throne. Apart from his face being a bit pale, there was nothing wrong with him. Seeing the 5 officials in front of him, Zhu Qizhen pointed at the table and said, "Dear officials, please sit down." "Thank you, Your Majesty. We are guilty, and we do not dare to sit." The 5 ministers looked at each other, shook their heads, and said that they were guilty. Often, the more polite the emperor was to you, the more it meant that it was not a good thing. They had seen this many times. Naturally, they did not dare to casually sit down. "AI, what are you guilty of?" "The guilty ones are the generals at the front lines. It has nothing to do with you. Sit down." "Minister Kuang, you're the oldest here, and your health hasn't been good for a while, so you should take the lead and sit down." "Oh right, is your body all right now?" Zhu Qizhen tried his best to express his concern for Kuang Yi and the others. "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. This official's body is fine," Kuang Yi said with a face full of gratitude. Good. It's good that you are fine. We cannot lack capable officials like you by our side. That's right, all of you should sit down." After a round of sentimentality, the other officials also looked for their seats and sat down one by one with expressions of gratitude on their faces. After everyone was seated, Zhu Qizhen let out a long sigh and said, "Dear officials, I'm sure you all know about the defeat of the front lines. It was all Wang Ji's rotten idea that caused us to make a mistake in our strategy. Also, the generals at the front lines were afraid of death, resulting in the current situation. We truly regret it." After a series of self-criticism, Zhu Qizhen shook his head with a look of regret. Then, he nodded to Chao Jixiang, who was standing to the side. "Yes," Chao Jixiang hurriedly replied. He then took out the golden back of the imperial edict and read it aloud. "By the will of the heavens, Your Majesty, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Wang Ji, retreated in fear of the enemy. He is to be immediately removed from his position and brought back to the capital to be imprisoned. The embroidered uniform guard, Chen Liang, is to be demoted to a baihu of the embroidered uniform guard. He is to be punished with half a year's salary. The governor of Huguang, Yang Xinmin, and the other officials are to be punished with a year's salary. They are to be demoted by half a rank and remain in the army." In the imperial edict, all the generals and officials of Yunnan were punished. This was especially true for Wang Ji. He had only been in Yunnan for less than a month, and he had gone from being in the limelight to being a prisoner. The situation had changed so quickly that it made people sigh at the unpredictability of heaven's might and the difficulty of being an official. After punishing all the officials, especially the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, it was the same as putting an end to the failure of the war. Next, it was time to talk about the current situation. "Dear officials, the traitor Zhu Huiqiang and the others have already caused chaos in Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong. They will soon reach Jiangxi. What advice do you have for us?" Zhu Qizhen's hopeful gaze fell on the 5 old officials. His face was filled with anticipation. What followed next was a period of silence in the inner hall. The Southern Ming Empire did not have a large army to begin with. Last time, when Kuang Yi was inspecting the guard stations, he discovered that there were some people who were not paid. As a result, the guards were not at full strength. At that time, the rough estimate was that there were less than 1 million people. Chapter 417. They had less than 1 million soldiers. Previously, they had used more than 300,000 soldiers in Yunnan. After several defeats, another 100,000 soldiers were added, but they were still defeated. Looking at it this way, even if the entire Southern Ming Empire's army was gathered together, they would only have about 500,000 soldiers or even less. These people still needed to guard many cities and prefectures, so it was impossible to mobilize all of them. Otherwise, not only Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong, but other places would also riot due to the absence of the military presence. Without a weapon to use, it was like a clever housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. No matter who it was, it would be difficult to solve the problem in a short period of time. Of course, it could not be solved now, but it did not mean that it could not be solved in the future. For example, they could recruit soldiers again. After the rule of Ren Xuanji, the population of the Great Ming Empire was still large. It was not difficult to recruit 1 million soldiers under the command of Ren Xuanji. The difficult thing was that they did not have the time. It took time to recruit soldiers, and so did training. If they really recruited 1 million soldiers, it would take at least 2 years to perfect it. It would take such a long time. Would the king of Min's people give it to them? What if they killed their way over during this time? The situation would be even more chaotic. Even if it was too late to recruit soldiers, there was another way that might work. It was to ask for help from Baiming. Today, Baiming did not have any wars because of geographical reasons. And it was said that they had just recruited a lot of soldiers and were training. They should have extra soldiers. If they could borrow 500,000 soldiers from them, the problem of the king of Min could be solved. But the problem was, would they agree? If they really borrowed 500,000 soldiers, would they listen to Ingzong? Don't turn the spearhead and charge to Nanjing. That would really be diverting the calamity. Don't think that Baiming wouldn't do such a thing. Why did the king of Shiping not go all out for a long time? Wasn't it because of them? It was because of their interference that the situation in Yunnan changed. The king of Min's strength was getting stronger and stronger, and now he occupied 3 provinces. It was too late to recruit soldiers, and asking for help was not reliable. No wonder the 5 ministers bowed their heads in silence. They really did not have a better way. Zhu Qizhen was disappointed when he saw the long silence. What's wrong? My beloved subjects, is there really no hope for our southern Ming dynasty? Are we really going to hand over the country our ancestors left to us? If that's the case, how am I supposed to face my ancestors? As he spoke, Zhu Qizhen's eyes actually welled up with tears, an extremely sorrowful appearance. We are incompetent. Wang Zhua and the other 4 important officials saw the emperor's actions and were so frightened that they hurriedly got up and knelt on the ground. People always say that if a minister is incompetent, then a monarch is tyrannical. Even the ruler of a country was forced to shed tears, so how could the subjects not be terrified? Zhu Qizhen was moved, but the ministers couldn't do anything about it. This made him even sadder. His heart seemed to be dripping blood when he saw the important ministers kneeling on the ground one after another. He had called a few important ministers over in order to find a chance to strike back. Could it be that there was really no other way? The Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, knelt on the ground. The Minister of Personnel, Chun Sun, knelt on the ground. The Minister of Justice, Xiao Xian, knelt on the ground. The Minister of War, Kuang Yi, did not kneel on the ground. Zhu Qizhen thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but when he looked again and saw that Kuang Yi was not kneeling on the ground, his eyes lit up. He suddenly stood up and asked with an anxious expression, "Minister Kuang, do you have a good plan?" "I don't dare to say that there is a good plan, but there is a way. If it works, it can buy us some time," Kuang Yi said with some uncertain evidence. By time? Zhu Qizhen seemed to be confused. Yes, by time. Our southern Ming dynasty has not been in a war for a long time, and our population is flourishing. As long as the emperor issues an imperial edict to recruit a large number of soldiers, it will not be long before we have an additional 1,000,000 soldiers. However, this will take some time. Right now, there's only one person who can buy us some time. Who is it? Zhu Qizhen's expression was incomparably nervous when he heard that there were still people and soldiers that could be used. He asked with hope in his eyes, as if he was afraid that Kuang Yi would not tell him the answer if he asked too late. The Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong. Kuang Yi did not make Zhu Qizhen wait for long. He firmly said a name. When the name was said, the other ministers who were looking at Kuang Yi also raised their heads in shock. Then, as if they thought of something, they slowly lowered their heads. Yang Qindong, the person who had once saved Ingzong on the battlefield, had become a taboo existence at a certain level. No one knew the reason for this. Perhaps it was because he was too capable, or perhaps it was because he was too good at fighting. However, such a person did not completely submit to the emperor. It was no wonder that everyone avoided talking about him. As a result, when Yang Qindong took action to deal with the Huang bandit army in Guangdong, no one in the imperial court was willing to speak up for him. It was as if everyone had a tacit understanding and did not ask about this person. This was like getting rid of a donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Now that he had encountered another big problem, someone had actually mentioned Yang Qindong. If he were to use him at this time, would he accept it? Would he agree? These were naturally the thoughts of the ministers. This matter was in Zhu Qixian's heart, but he had more considerations. He knew about Sumaner's matter. Although he did not appear from the beginning to the end, he had already tacitly approved of Commander Menda's actions. This could not be denied. In other words, he also had thoughts of killing Yang Chendong. There was no familial love in the eyes of the imperial family. This was something that everyone knew. However, the actual situation was not only that there was no kinship, but also that it was difficult for gratitude to exist. Since ancient times, how many officials had saved the emperor's life, but in the end, how many of them had a good ending? As the saying went, it was fine to share weal and woe, but it was hard to say if one could share joy. Even if Yang Chendong had saved Ingzong's life, even if he had contributed greatly to the South Ming Empire, just based on the fact that he was good at fighting but was unable to become a loyal minister, there was no room for discussion about killing him. Under various circumstances, Zhu Qixian tacitly approved of Commander Menda's actions. Moreover, he had received a secret report from the embroidered uniform guards saying that Sumaner had succeeded. Yang Chendong had been staying in the military camp, using the excuse of recuperating and so on. When he heard this news, Zhu Qixian could not help but feel a trace of sympathy in his heart. However, after a while, he forgot about this matter. Perhaps in his eyes, saving his life was not important. What was important was his throne and whether or not he could inherit the country left behind by his ancestors. It was because he had already sentenced Yang Chendong to death in his heart that this person had long disappeared from his mind. Thus, when the situation was critical, he did not think of this person. Now that he heard Kuang Ye's reminder, doubt appeared in his heart. Could it be that Yang Chendong was not dead? If he was not dead, he could make good use of it now. Beloved official Kuang, where is he now? After Zhu Qixian's thoughts returned to normal, he asked with hope. Replying to your majesty, the Duke of Zhongdan is currently outside Gaozhou Prefecture in Guangdong. I heard that he is sick and is currently recuperating. Over there, my Ministry of War's Guaning, Embroidered Uniform Guards Steward Wei Guang, and Guangdong Guards Commander General Ma Wei are all there. Kuang Yi replied in a low voice and gave a simple description of the situation over there. As for why those people were there, the emperor should be very clear about it. Oh, Zhen remembers now. Zhu Qixian suddenly understood and nodded his head. He thought of the secret report from the genie guard a while ago. It said that Wei Guang was thinking of ways to persuade the mercenaries to work for him. At that time, he also thought that this was a good idea. The Great Ming Empire was vast and abundant in resources. What good things did it not have? As long as he was sincere enough, it was not impossible to keep those mercenaries who could fight for him. However, he did not receive any secret reports in such a long time. It seemed that the progress of the matter was not smooth. If it was not smooth, then it was good. If it was not smooth, then there was a possibility of Yang Chendong sending troops to quell the rebellion. Otherwise, if he really accepted the mercenaries, it would be equivalent to falling out with them. Zhu Qixian quickly made a decision in his heart. After the court, he would notify the embroidered uniform guards and have them stop what they were doing to the mercenaries. At least on the surface, they would ease the relationship between them. However, this was a method of mending the pen after the sheep had been lost. The important thing was to discuss with Yang Chendong. Thinking of this, he said to Kuang Yi, Zhen heard that the Duke of Loyal Valor is sick. Is his illness serious? This, I do not know. I have sent Guaning to visit him, but I have not seen him. He could not even enter the barracks. I think his rank is not high enough. Kuang Yi hesitated as he spoke. If that's the case, we should send an important official over. Zhu Qixian nodded as he said this. Then his gaze fell on Kuang Yi. Beloved official Kuang, I am afraid that I will have to trouble you to make a trip. If you can see the Duke of Loyal Valor, ask him to take action no matter what. Don't ask him to defeat the rebels, but at least stabilize the current situation and buy time for our Southern Ming dynasty to develop. I am old. This time, Kuang Yi did not immediately agree. Instead, he spoke with an ambiguous attitude. Kuang Yi said this because he was complaining. He was complaining about how Ingzong grounded him at home a while ago. Now that he had a use for him, he did not think about the fact that he was almost 70 years old. Chapter 418. When the word old was mentioned, one could see that Ingzong's face instantly turned green. Ahem. How can Minister Kuang say that? Your body is healthy, so I think it's good. Didn't you tell me to rest at home a while ago? You should be fine now. I'm still not feeling well. Moreover, Gaozhou Prefecture is very far from Nanjing. I can't guarantee that I can get there quickly. When Kuang Yi saw that Zhu Qizhen had a guilty look on his face when he mentioned his illness, he felt pity for him and his heart softened. However, when he considered the long journey, he was afraid that he would make a mistake and instinctively wanted to refuse. It's fine. You can take a carriage there. I will arrange for the relay stations along the way. Kuang Yi listened to the announcement. Zhu Qizhen was afraid that if he continued to delay, Kuang Yi would find another excuse. Thus, he said in a firm tone, Minister of War Kuang Yi is an experienced strategist. As my right-hand man, you will be conferred the title of Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince and also the Minister of War. He was conferred an official just like that. The Crown Prince's junior tutor was one of the 3 orphans. At the same time, he was a secondary grade 1 official and also the Minister of War. It could be said that he held great power and was definitely one of the pillars of the imperial court. As soon as the imperial edict was passed down, the other 5 ministers all had looks of envy on their faces. Words of congratulations could be heard one after another. When the imperial edict was given, Kuang Yi was extremely touched. Ever since the Great Ming dynasty was split into the north and south, there were no longer any primary grade officials in the imperial court. The cabinet was also removed. The ministers of the 6 ministries became the leaders of the officials. He originally thought that he would be satisfied if he could keep his position until he retired. However, he never thought that there would be a day when he would be promoted to Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince and become a secondary grade 1 official. With such a position, he could definitely be called the leader of the officials. How could he not be excited and moved by this honor? He was so touched that he knelt on the ground. Thank you for your kindness. I will go home and pack up before heading to Guangdong. Even if I have to sacrifice my old bones, I will persuade the loyal duke to work for the Great Ming dynasty and defeat the enemy. Good. Seeing that Kuang Yi was so straightforward, Zhu Qizhen happily stood up and said, as expected of a loyal minister of the Great Ming dynasty, a pillar of the country. Just like that, Minister Kuang immediately packed up and left. Everyone else had to cooperate with him to the best of their ability. In addition, if the Duke of Loyalty and Courage raises any conditions, my beloved subject can also agree to them on our behalf. Yes, Your Majesty. With Zhu Qizhen's words, Kuang Ye's heart was filled with confidence. He had more confidence in the Guangdong trip. In this meeting with the Emperor, Kuang Yi was conferred the title of Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince and regained the favor of the Emperor. Outside the Kuang Manor, there was an endless stream of officials who came to congratulate him. It was a scene of prosperity. In comparison, the mercenary camp outside Gaozhou City was as quiet as usual. After more than a month of training, all the cold vanguard soldiers and the auxiliary soldiers had gone through several forest battle drills. This allowed them to have a better understanding of how to fight in the forest. From being completely passive in the beginning to having the ability to fight back, their conditioned reflexes had formed. As long as they were walking in the forest, they would instinctively make some defensive or offensive responses if the slightest bit of the situation was wrong. Not bad, the military quality of the cold vanguard soldiers is very high. There are also quite a few good seedlings among the auxiliary soldiers. I'm afraid that it won't be long before the elite cold vanguard soldiers expand. Yang Qindong looked at the results of the drills that the various companies sent over and nodded repeatedly. He appeared very satisfied. Seeing that Yang Qindong was in a good mood, Hu Mang, who was at the side, hurriedly handed over the report card about the temporary auxiliary soldiers' studies. Young master, take a look at this. It's the results of the temporary auxiliary soldiers. Not bad, There are actually so many who can score 60 points. Very good, very good. Looking at the results, although the knowledge tested was only for the second grade of elementary school, it was already very difficult to score a passing score. This at least meant that the literacy class was successful. Yes, not only did the political committee work hard, even the two madams put in a lot of effort. Some of them are already qualified to be temporary auxiliary soldiers and are even close to the standard of the cold vanguard soldiers. Now, their loyalty is still to be tested. Tiger's Mane reported everything he knew to Yang Qindong. Loyalty is indeed a problem. No matter how strong a person is, no matter how strong a soldier is, without loyalty, the stronger they are, the easier it is for them to betray their master. Tell the political committee to pay special attention to this test. Yang Qindong nodded in agreement. Yes, young master is right. These people haven't been to Resin City, so it's not easy to do some work. After all, we can't be sure if there are spies from other parties. Now isn't the time to announce young master's identity. Tiger's Mane said in a troubled tone. The soldiers who joined the army in Resin City usually didn't have to worry too much about their loyalty. Other things aside, just the changes that could be seen with one's eyes were enough to let everyone know who to follow in order to live a good life. When they and their families lived a good life and didn't have to worry about food and drink, they would have to think about who brought all this to them. Why would they need to worry about loyalty? When someone mentioned that they had to join the army to protect their home and the fruits of victory from being violated by others, the number of people who joined the army had already reached 90%. In addition to the benefits a soldier could enjoy, it was enough to feed a family of 5 without having to worry about food and water. Once they reached a certain age and needed to retire from active service, they would be given jobs that others envied. Even those who were injured on the battlefield would be in high demand once they returned home. With all these benefits, why would they need to worry about the lack of manpower? Why would he need to worry that these people would have any rebellious thoughts and intentions? However, it was different in the territory of the Great Ming Dynasty. There were some people whose backgrounds weren't even clear. Even if one tried to brainwash these people, they wouldn't be able to meet the best requirements. If they were allowed to understand too much about these people, they would be exposed even more. If Yang Qindong's identity was exposed because of this, wouldn't there be a huge problem? At the very least, the safety of his family in the capital became the most important thing to worry about. We still need to seriously investigate their backgrounds. For those who we can't be completely sure of, we can consider persuading them to leave the ranks of temporary auxiliary soldiers. In short, if there is a trace of uncertainty, we can't use them, let alone use them. Yang Qindong nodded. How could he not know what the consequences would be if his current identity was exposed? At that time, even if he didn't rebel, others would say that he had rebelled. Why didn't he just become a subject of the Great Ming Dynasty? Why did he suddenly raise so many soldiers? If he really became a Sima Zhao, everyone would know about it. However, many times what one feared would happen. Just as Yang Qindong and Tiger's Mane were discussing the loyalty of the temporary auxiliary soldiers, the deputy director of the security bureau, Yang San, hurriedly came looking for them. Panting, Yang San's appearance gave Yang Qindong a very bad feeling. Normally, Yang San's physical fitness was not bad. Under normal circumstances, even if he ran 10 kilometers, he would not be so out of breath. However, now that he was acting like this, it could only mean one thing. Something big must have happened. Young master, things are not good. One of our auxiliary soldiers has been captured. As expected, just as Yang San steadied himself, a very bad news came out of his mouth. What exactly happened? Yang Qindong asked with an unfriendly expression. It's like this. Yang San then gave a short report of what had happened. The person who was captured was called Lu Jin. He was a platoon leader in the auxiliary battalion who had just been promoted not long ago. He was a soldier from Mount Qishan on Ryukyu Island. His family had been in Mount Qishan for generations, so his background was very clean. In addition, he was very motivated and learned everything quickly. It didn't take long for him to become the squad leader of the auxiliary battalion. A while ago, because of his good performance, he was promoted to platoon leader of the auxiliary battalion. Under normal circumstances, Those who could become platoon leader of the auxiliary battalion were qualified to enter the cold front. All they lacked was an opportunity to be tested. This time, during the training of the auxiliary battalion in the jungle battle, Lu Jian's performance was very outstanding. After the training results reached the standard, the battalion commander gave everyone a day off and allowed them to enter the nearby Gaozhou prefecture for a stroll. Lu Jian also took a day off and entered the city with his 5 comrades. This was also one of the military rules. Soldiers were not allowed to enter the city alone to prevent accidents from happening. Once the 5 of them were together, they could more or less take care of each other if anything happened. The chances of accidents happening were reduced to the lowest. Originally, Lu Jian and his group had been together since they entered the city. However, when they came across a rouge shop, Lu Jian thought that he should buy some things for his newly married wife in Mount Xishan. He also heard that the quality of the things in the Central Plains were very good, so he wanted to go in and take a look. However, his other comrades rejected his idea. They all laughed and said that this rouge shop was only for women. It was embarrassing for a man to go in. The others were not willing to go with him. So Lu Jian entered the rouge shop called Song's Rouge Shop alone and asked the other 4 to wait outside for a while. However, once he went in, there was no news of him. It was not until more than 15 minutes later that his 4 comrades felt that something was wrong. They went in together, but they didn't see Lu Jian inside. Feeling that this was a serious matter, 2 of the auxiliary soldiers stayed behind to keep watch outside the rouge shop. The other 2 quickly went out of the city and reported to the barracks. After Yang San received the news, he immediately asked for instructions from Yang Qindong. Chapter 419. Young Master, Platoon Leader Lu Jian is an auxiliary soldier who joined from Xishan. He knows a lot of things. If anything happens to him, I'm afraid the consequences will be unthinkable. After Yang San finished speaking, he reminded him softly. Tiger's Mane's expression was also nervous, as if he was afraid that Yang Qindong didn't understand. He added, "Young Master, to be able to become a platoon leader of an auxiliary soldier, he basically knows your true identity." "I know." Yang Qindong nodded heavily. "But you shouldn't underestimate our soldiers. Since he can become a platoon leader, I'm sure that Soldier Lu Jian is a person with a strong will. We must all have confidence. Of course, just in case they had to find the person, and the sooner the better. How about this? Let's enter the city and see who has the guts to capture our people." After he finished speaking, Yang Qindong's eyes were already spitting out cold flames of anger. Could be seen that he was really angry this time. This wasn't as simple as capturing his people. The person behind the scenes probably wanted to know the true strength of the mercenaries. "Young Master, tell others that you're sick." When Tiger's Mane heard that Yang Qindong was going to personally go, he said worriedly. "Besides, to find someone, Young Master doesn't need to do it himself. I can go." "You can't, at least not now." Yang Qindong shook his head decisively. It wasn't that he didn't trust Tiger's Mane, but Tiger's Mane's identity to the outside world was only his own servant. He didn't have any official position. If he went like this, it would be very inconvenient. He wasn't. Even if he didn't have the identity of an imperial envoy, he was still a loyal duke of the Great Ming Dynasty. Even if this title was given by Daizong and some people in the Southern Ming Dynasty didn't recognize it, he still had the identity of a loyal duke. As for telling others that he was sick, it was very simple. He just had to appear weak. It was also a good opportunity to see how those who wanted to harm him would react when they saw him like this. After Yang Qindong made up his mind, Tiger's Man and Yang San knew that they couldn't stop him, so they quickly went to prepare. Since they even dared to capture auxiliary soldiers, they had to be prepared to fall out with them at any time. This time, they couldn't bring fewer soldiers into the city. Gaozhou Prefecture. There was an inconspicuous courtyard in the city. Broken walls could be seen everywhere, reminding people that this place had experienced a war not long ago. Courtyards like this could be seen everywhere in the city. After the Huang bandit army raided Gaozhou Prefecture twice, this place had long been emptied out. No one knew where the original owner had gone. This ownerless courtyard had now become the place where the embroidered uniform guards worked. Before this, Wei Guang had arranged for people to dig a cellar here. Thus, Lu Jian's kidnapping wasn't a coincidence. It was premeditated. It was just that his luck wasn't good and he just happened to be the target and kidnapped. In the courtyard, Wei Guang stood there in his embroidered guard uniform. Beside him was a subordinate who wasn't very tall. At this moment, he was explaining something with a bitter face. "You didn't say anything? Didn't we allow you to use your methods?" Wei Guang's brows furrowed and he seemed very displeased. "Boss, this brat's skin is rough and his flesh is thick. He's very tight-lipped. If we didn't discover him in time, he would have bitten his tongue and killed himself. I think we should slow down and not be too hasty." When the short brat explained this, a trace of envy appeared on his face. Biting his tongue and killing himself? What a tough guy. Wei Guang was also shocked by this news. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "Lu Si, keep an eye on this person. If we really need to slow down, think of a way to send him out of the city. You have to know that he's a mercenary. Once someone finds out that he was captured by us, I'm afraid we'll all have to bear the consequences." "Boss, it can't be. We're the embroidered uniform guards. We don't need a reason to capture people. Even if they find out, what can they do to us?" Lu Si's face was full of disbelief. Maybe they can't do anything to us? Or maybe they won't even care about losing a person. But no matter what, we still need to be prepared. How about this, you go and arrange it. Try your best to send him out of the city and find a safer place. Wei Guang didn't know why, but his right eye suddenly twitched twice. When he spoke these words, he was especially careful. Boss, there's urgent news." Another embroidered uniform guard quickly ran into the courtyard. "What's the rush? Where's the steadiness I usually tell you to be?" When Wei Guang saw that his subordinates didn't have any discernment and were so rash, a fierce look flashed across his face. "Boss, the mercenaries have entered the city. I heard that the Duke of Loyalty has also entered the city." The embroidered uniform guard ignored Wei Guang's displeased look and told him the news he just received in one breath. "What?" Wei Guang, who was pretending to be absent-minded, suddenly froze when he heard this sentence. Then, as if he remembered something, he grabbed the collar of his subordinate and said, "What did you just say? Repeat it again." With his collar grabbed, the embroidered uniform guard found it difficult to breathe. At this moment, he didn't dare to resist. Instead, he forcefully repeated, "The mercenaries have entered the city." Looking at their grandiose appearance, I'm afraid there are no less than 2,000 of them. Among them, there's also a very luxurious carriage. I heard from others that it's the Duke of Loyalty's personal carriage. Bastard, how could this be? With a sudden force, Wei Guang let go of the embroidered uniform guard's big hand. Then, he fiercely stomped his foot and glared at Lu Si as he said, "Don't move first. Let me go take a look first. That's right, instruct the people here to keep their eyes open. Once they find something wrong, kill them. In short, don't leave any evidence behind." Seeing that Wei Guang was so anxious, Lu Si didn't dare to be negligent and immediately nodded. "Boss, don't worry. Once something goes wrong, we'll kill them to silence them. The dead tell no tales." "Very good, let's go." Seeing that his subordinates understood his meaning, Wei Guang didn't want to stay here any longer. With a wave of his hand, he left the courtyard with nearly 30 embroidered uniform guards. However, what he didn't know was that his every move was being watched by someone. On the roof of a courtyard that was almost a street away, someone was using a high-powered telescope to see everything that was happening. The most frightening thing was that the person who was observing could read lips. In other words, the conversation between Wei Guang and Lu Si was also clearly heard by someone else. Young master is really amazing. He actually thought that it might be the embroidered uniform guards and arranged for us to follow Sir Xianxia. Now that we know that Lu Jian is here, it's easy to handle. Tai, who put down the high-powered telescope in his hand and revealed a fierce face. The captain of the Wolf Fong Special Forces. Tai, who was the one who could read lips and had been observing everything that was happening in the courtyard. In fact, not only Tai, who But also the other 19 members of the Wolfang Special Forces were proficient in lip reading. This was also the special requirement that Yang Chendong had for them. Since they were the elites of the elites, not only did they have the most advanced weapons in their hands, but they also had to be able to rely on their own abilities. Tai Hu said confidently, but in the eyes of the extremely thin team member beside him, he couldn't help but worry. Tiger King, the sixth young master, said that the embroidered uniform guards are not weak. You must not be careless. Although Wei Guang is gone now, there are at least 10 embroidered uniform guards around. If you are not careful, Lu Jian's life will be lost. If something happens to him, our mission will be considered a failure. Nonsense, this captain doesn't know this point. Do I need you to remind me? Alright, Skinny Monkey, hurry up and arrange the mission. Let King Kong, Violent Ape, Silverhand, and Steel Leg get ready. Also, inform Captain Bai Zhua of the Ghost Sniper team. Tell them that the opportunity to contribute and kill the enemy has come. Tai Hu said as he slapped the man with the nickname of Skinny Monkey. Skinny Monkey retreated as if he was flying backward. In just a blink of an eye, Skinny Monkey had retreated at least 4 meters away, which also allowed him to avoid Tai Hu's slap. It was obvious that this was not the first time something like this had happened. Skinny Monkey, who had retreated far away, heard that Tai Hu wanted to cooperate with the Ghost Sniper team to complete the mission. He knew that his captain was very careful in doing things even though he said it happily. His heart was relieved. All right, Tiger King, please wait for a moment. I will go and inform them now. Skinny Monkey, who had finished speaking, disappeared from the roof after a few ups and downs. It gave people the feeling that he was moving so fast that it was as if he was teleporting. Gaozhou Prefecture Government Compound. This place was completely surrounded by the mercenaries. Among them, there were a few Ming soldiers who were unwilling to submit and wanted to resist. Following that, they were showered with blows from the mercenaries. They thought that they were strong, but when faced with the angry elite Leng Feng, they were no different from children facing adults. What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you trying to rebel? The sudden attack caught the Ming army off guard. A few of the centurions of the Ming army shouted aggressively, wanting to use their power to suppress the enemy. Bang, 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 bang. What greeted this voice was a few powerful fists. The centurions who were shouting just now were soon swollen like pigs. Even when they spoke, their voices were no longer as clear and precise. What's going on? Everyone stop. The commotion here quickly attracted the attention of others. Following that, a loud shout was heard. General Yu Guang, who was fully clad in armor, appeared. When he saw that the people who were beaten up were all his subordinates, even the whiskers on his lips could not help but tremble a few times. Who was the one who attacked just now? Who was it? Stand out if you have the guts. Chapter 420. It's me. What do you want? Luo Pe, the commander of the 2nd Regiment of the Leng Feng Army, walked out of the crowd with the rank of colonel. He looked at Yu Guang with a mocking expression. Commander Luo? Yu Guang groaned in his heart when he recognized the person. From what he knew, this person was the leader of the mercenary army. Since he had stepped forward, the situation must be very bad. Right? Could it be that they wanted to rebel like King Min and the others? Yu Guang's expression changed again and again when he had this thought. He knew the strength of the mercenary army. They had fought side by side before. At that time, he felt happy to have such an ally and fought to his heart's content. However, when this person became his opponent, he felt the same pressure on his shoulders. Yu Guang's expression changed again and his aura weakened. When the other Ming soldiers saw this, they couldn't help but lower their heads. Even their commander was about to give in. They didn't know what to do next. As the saying goes, a single soldier can bear the brunt of the enemy, but a whole nest of generals can bear the brunt of the enemy. Yu Guang didn't dare to say anything else. Luo Pe snorted coldly, then glanced at the Ming army in front of him and said, All soldiers, listen to my orders. If anyone dares to resist, beat him up first. If anyone dares to resist with weapons, we will let them have a taste of bullets. Yes. The Lung Feng members standing behind Luo Pa replied in unison. Their aura was truly like a landslide or a tsunami. Okay, 1 battalion will follow me in. The rest will stay outside. Without orders, no one is allowed to leave. After giving the order, Luo Pa strode into the government office. Wherever he went, the Ming soldiers who were originally blocking his way would all move out of his way, afraid that they would provoke him and get beaten up for nothing. Yu Guang originally wanted to stop Luo Pa, but when he saw the murderous aura in his eyes, his legs went soft. He didn't doubt that if he dared to block him, Luo Pa would really kill him. Wasn't Zhaoqing's general, Jia Ping, killed by Yang Qindong? After the incident, the imperial court did not say anything. Could it be that his life was more valuable than others? Yu Guang unconsciously retreated. The other Ming soldiers also retreated with him. It was not until they reached the gates of the inner courtyard that a shout came from behind them. Only then did the Ming soldiers, whose morale was already extremely low, stop. What's going on? What are you all doing? The voice behind Yu Guang was like the sound of nature to him, causing him to involuntarily stop in his tracks, following which he quickly turned around. General Ma, the mercenaries suddenly surrounded our magistrate's office. This general tried to reason with them, but they actually attacked us. General, please uphold justice for our brothers. General, please make the decision. The other Ming soldiers followed suit, looking as if they had been greatly wronged. Useless. When Ma Wei saw that Yu Guang only knew how to complain, he couldn't help but feel angry. He thought to himself, if they can attack, can't you guys fight back? However, he naturally couldn't say such words. After all, the mercenaries were considered allies. Moreover, he still wanted to recruit them for his own use. If he really said such words, it would be impossible to recruit them. But no matter what kind of plan he had in mind, since the mercenaries had come knocking on his door, he still had to show his toughness. Otherwise, wouldn't he be looked down upon by others? After softly reprimanding Yu Guang, Ma Wei's gaze landed on Luo Pa, following which he sneered. Isn't this Commander Luo? What's going on? What happened to provoke you to bring an army to surround my magistrate's office? If you can't give me an explanation for this matter, even if you are mercenaries, you will still have to pay the price. Looking at Luo Pa, who was chatting enthusiastically with everyone a while ago, General Ma Wei put down his pride. At that time, he wanted to recruit Luo Pa and wanted some temporary auxiliary soldiers to join his side. Naturally, he could say any kind of soft words and lower his head to anything. However, it was different now. The other party had already killed their way to him. If he still lowered his head, he would be seen as weak. Pay the price? I think you are the ones who have to pay the price. Facing Ma Wei, who was about to flip out, Luo Pa didn't have the slightest bit of fear. He still had his head held high. What? Do you really think you are invincible? Please remember, this is the Southern Ming Empire's territory. How can you be so arrogant in our territory? Men surround them. Ma Wei saw that Luo Pa still didn't give up even after he had stepped forward. He immediately became angry. No matter what, he was still a general of the Guangdong Guards, a dignified third-grade military general. Since he didn't give him any face, so what if he fought to the death? Lord Guan and Wei Guang have arrived. Just when Luo Pa was about to retaliate and the soldiers on both sides were about to go to war, a shout came from outside the door. Then, Guaning and Wei Guang each brought a few subordinates into the courtyard. You came at the right time. The arrival of these two people made Ma Wei sigh in relief. Just now, he was the only one who had to maintain the situation. Now that these two people were here, there was someone to discuss what to do. Most importantly, if something happened, there would be someone to take the blame. You came at the right time. To Ma Wei's surprise, Luo Pa wasn't afraid when he saw the arrival of these two people. Instead, he looked very happy. He even waved his hand and let Lung Feng, who was guarding here, open a path for the two people to lead the soldiers into the courtyard. Guaning and Wei Guang, one was an official of the Ministry of War and the other was a Guang of the Brocade Guards. They didn't usually stay in the government office. They came after receiving the news. As the two walked into the courtyard, they frowned and looked at their surroundings with a puzzled expression. What is going on? Commander Luo is also here? I don't know if you can give a reasonable explanation. Even if we treat the mercenaries as friends and allies, you can't do things that hurt each other's feelings for no reason. Guanyin was still calm and wasn't very angry. Instead, he narrowed his eyes and asked. No one knew what he was thinking. Guanyin was very clear about the combat strength of the mercenaries. There were only 1,000 Ming soldiers in Gaozhou. If they really fought, they wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between the enemy's teeth. But even so, even if he lost, he didn't lose. Even if he died, he would be a ghost who understood the situation. Just as Guanyin finished speaking calmly, Wei Guang opened his mouth and said, What is going on? Can't you see? Moving soldiers into the city without orders is already a violation of the laws of the Ming dynasty. No matter what the reason is, we can't let it go. This was a preemptive strike. Wei Guang, who knew what he had done, spoke in an interrogative tone. He wanted to muddy the waters and put the blame on the other party first. In this way, he would have the initiative in his hands. When Guanyin heard Wei Guang's words, he frowned. This was clearly putting the blame on them. Wouldn't this be forcing the mercenaries to do something extreme? If this was the case, no one present would be in a good mood, especially since the Min King's faction was very powerful. Even Guangdong was divided into two. If they were to create such a powerful enemy like the mercenaries, the Southern Ming dynasty would really be finished. This was no longer a matter of face. It was a matter of whether the Southern Ming dynasty could survive or not. Guanyin was naturally careful. He glared at Wei Guang, warning him not to speak carelessly. Then, he looked towards Luo Pe and said, Commander Luo, this official believes that there must be a reason for you to come here and mobilize so many people. However, may I know what it is for? Seeing that Guanyin's words were still considered polite, Luo Pe nodded. All right, since Lord Guan wants to get to the bottom of this, then this commander will tell you. Just over 2 hours ago, one of our mercenary soldiers went missing in the city. This is a provocation to our mercenary army. You must give us an explanation for this matter. Otherwise, we can only investigate it ourselves. Even if we have to turn the entire city upside down, we must have a conclusion to this matter. A soldier of the mercenaries went missing? Hearing this result, Guanyin's face was filled with shock. Not only him, even General Ma Wei, who was confused just now, had his mouth wide open. He stood there with an incredulous expression. Wei Guang's heart skipped a beat. His guess was right. These people came for Lu Jian. However, he didn't expect that they would mobilize so many people just because one person went missing. Presumably, that person must know a lot of secrets. As long as he could get through this hurdle, he would be able to obtain first-hand information about the mercenaries. Looking at it this way, all the risks were worth it. Of course, whether the matter would have the result he wanted, it would depend on whether he could get through this hurdle or not. If he could get through it safely, then everything would be easy to discuss. Thinking of this, Wei Guang took half a step forward. He pointed at Luo Pe and said, What? You lost one person and you come looking for us? What kind of logic is this? Who knows if your soldiers are deserters because they're afraid of war? We won't take the blame for this. Seeing Wei Guang jump out first, Luo Pe's expression didn't change. He only said sternly, Wei Guang, please be careful with your words. Our mercenaries will not have any deserters. Don't use your subordinates' methods on us brothers. You can't bear the consequences. Being threatened again, Wei Guang's expression was naturally very ugly. Luo Pe, you should also watch your words. I am a member of the embroidered uniform guard. Outsiders have no right to order me around. Chapter 4:21. Everyone, please don't get angry. Guanyin saw that Wei Guang's tone was not friendly. He was afraid that if this continued, the two sides would fight before the matter was cleared up. If that happened, the truth would never be revealed. Therefore, he stood up and wanted to be a peacemaker. Commander Luo, Wei Guang's attitude may not be very good, But what he said is the truth. You want to search the entire city for one missing person. Isn't this too much? If the final result is that you still can't find the person you're looking for after turning the city upside down, how will you explain it then? Facing Guan Yingyan's question, Luopa still shook his head expressionlessly. I can't guarantee whether I can find him or not, but I'm also acting on orders. If anyone dares to stop me, then they are my enemy. It's that simple, so I hope you can make it easy. Acting on orders. The moment these 4 words were said, Guan Yingyan, Ma Wei, and Wei Guang's expressions all changed dramatically. Who was Luopa? He was the commander of the mercenary army, the most elite commander of the Cold Front. It could be said that he was the highest officer of this mercenary army. If even he had to say that he was acting on orders, then the answer to whose orders he was acting on seemed to be right in front of them. Zhongdang Duke is here? Guan Yingyan asked as he took a deep breath in his heart. Yes, he's here. Zhongdang Duke, please. Luopa nodded. His task was originally to surround the 3 lords and the many Ming soldiers here. Since he had already done that, then the next stage was not his own stage, but to be handed over to the 6th young master. Following Luopo's loud shout, a carriage, under the protection of many able-bodied men, slowly drove into the inner courtyard from the outside. Before this, all the obstacles that prevented the carriage from moving had been cleaned up. In the cellar of the small courtyard, Lu Si, dressed in the uniform of the brocade guard, was still interrogating Lu Jian, who was beaten black and blue and covered in blood. Brother, we were still a family 500 years ago. Just say what you want to say. Why do you have to suffer like this? It really makes my heart ache. Lu Si's voice echoed in Lu Jian's ears. Lu Jian, who was tied up, opened his eyes with great difficulty. His eyelashes fluttered and he seemed to be mumbling something. Seeing that Lu Jian was about to speak, Lu Si hurriedly moved his face closer, wanting to hear what was being said. Suddenly, a mouthful of saliva flew towards his face. Completely caught off guard, Lu Si was spat all over his face. When he sensed that there was blood in the saliva, he wiped it away forcefully before glaring angrily. Brat, you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being impolite. Next, I'll make you beg for death. Men, continue the torture. Lu Si was so enraged that he ignored Lu Jian's injuries and wanted to torture him. He wanted to see if this person was made of iron. Did he really not know what pain was? Boom! Just as he finished speaking, an embroidered uniform guard approached step by step with a thin whip that was dipped in salt water. Suddenly, the cellar door was broken from the outside. Following that, a powerful man appeared in their line of sight. The man was tall and muscular, and his muscular body gave people a feeling of explosive power. As soon as he appeared, he charged forward like a mad bull. First, the embroidered uniform guard with the whip only saw a black shadow getting bigger and bigger in his eyes. Then, before he could do anything to dodge, he felt a sharp pain all over his body. It was as if all his ribs were broken at this moment. His whole body flew backwards because of this. With just one collision, he heavily injured an embroidered uniform guard. Following that, the black shadow rushed towards Lu Si. The sudden change was too fast. It was so fast that Lu Si only managed to grab the spring-embroidered saber at his waist with his right hand before his whole body flew backwards. His ears were filled with the whistling sound of the wind. Only when he hit the wall behind him did he stop. He felt as if all the bones in his body had fallen apart. With a plop, he fell to the ground. In just 2 rounds, the intruder had completely controlled the situation in the cellar. This result made everyone clap their hands in satisfaction. Then they lightly spat out 4 words, unable to withstand a single blow. The cellar door was once again opened from the outside. Wolf Fong, Captain Tai, who brought Skinny Monkey and the others out. When he saw the situation in front of him, Skinny Monkey chuckled. Not bad. Violent Ape is indeed violent. You finished the battle so quickly. Humph. It's just that these people are too incompetent. Violent Ape said unconcernedly. He looked as if he hadn't had enough fun yet. All right, let's save them first. Then we'll capture these two people and bring them to the young master. Tai Hu saw that the situation had been settled. The problem in the cellar had been solved. The Ghost Shadow Sniper team had taken action outside and killed all the other embroidered uniform guards. The danger no longer existed. He also let out a sigh of relief. After all, this time they were facing the elite embroidered uniform guards. Moreover, they had hostages in the hands of the other party. If they were careless, it could cause extremely serious consequences and disappoint the young master. Fortunately, the other party wasn't on guard. In addition, they were well prepared. With the help of the Ghost Sniper team, the problem was solved smoothly. At this time, Lu Si still had some strength in his body. He heard Tai Hu's voice in his ears. Immediately, he shouted loudly, "I'm from the Imperial Court's embroidered uniform guards. Who are you? Who allowed you to do this? Do you know that this is a crime that will lead to the confiscation of your family's property and the extermination of your family? You talk too much nonsense." Lu Si was still shouting. Skinny Monkey had already walked over impatiently. He lifted his foot and lightly kicked Lu Si. In an instant, Lu Si stopped moving. Obviously, this kick had knocked him out. The inner court of the magistrate's office. As the luxurious carriage drove in, it quickly began to clear the place. All unrelated people were kicked out. Even the bodyguards beside Guaning, Ma Wei, and Wei Guang were not left behind. Regarding this, the three naturally wanted to resist. However, when Qiu Vi led the first guard team to attack Peng Yu Ba Daojiang, and the other team members attacked together, how could those people be a match for them? They were either beaten to the ground or half kneeling on the ground with bloody noses and swollen faces. In short, there wasn't a single good person. Seeing that the strength of his subordinates was so weak, Guaning straightforwardly ordered everyone to leave. Since they couldn't win, it was better not to test the waters. It would be embarrassing. The inner court finally quieted down. Other than the three so-called Southern Ming officials and the first guard team, there was also the luxurious carriage that had been parked there without any movement. After calming down, Guaning decided to face everything that had happened. He cupped his fist and asked in a very respectful tone, "Is the Duke of Loyalty in the carriage?" "It's me." After a short pause, a voice finally came from the carriage. Then the curtain was pulled open by Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, revealing Yang Chundong, who was wearing a green robe inside. Compared to the last time they met, Yang Chundong's face was pale, his eyes were dull, and his cheekbones seemed to be protruding a little. It was as if he had completely changed into a different person. He was much older. "Duke of Loyalty? What's going on? Why are you so sick?" Seeing Yang Chundong's appearance, Guaning was really shocked. He asked in disbelief, I was careless. I was poisoned a while ago. Fortunately, God blessed me. The mercenaries sent me a divine pill to detoxify the poison. That was how I managed to save my life." Yang Chindong's face was pale as he forced a smile, but what followed was a series of rapid coughs. It gave people the feeling that he had tuberculosis and would die from coughing at any time. Yang Chindong's appearance naturally shocked Guaning and Ma Wei. At first, they thought that he was looking for an excuse to not meet them because he was sick. But after a long time, they couldn't help but have all kinds of guesses. But in the end, they didn't expect his condition to be so serious. It looked as if he would die at any time. On the other hand, Wei Guang's expression didn't change. On the contrary, he was secretly delighted. What was going on? He probably had the clearest judgment in his heart. This time, he came to Gaozhou Prefecture to see how Yang Chindong's condition was. He didn't expect that after not getting an answer for a long time, he would see hope when he thought there was no hope. Just by looking at it, the Duke of Loyalty was indeed seriously injured. It was the result of Su Miner's attack. But what Wei Guang didn't expect was that if she attacked, he should be dead. How could he still be alive? Could it be that it was like what was said just now, that it was a divine antidote sent by the mercenaries? If that was the case, how many good things did the mercenaries have that they didn't take out? While Wei Guang was still pondering over the crux of the matter, Yang Chundong had already opened his mouth once again. "Sirs, This time the mercenaries had no choice but to act. As you all know, the mercenaries are very protective of their people. Anyone who dares to provoke them will not have a good ending. Now that a person has gone missing, and I heard that it's an officer, it's reasonable that they would be angry. How about this? I will be the middleman and give everyone a chance. If anyone is the one who captured him, stand up and ask for forgiveness now. I can even consider interceding for him. Maybe he can still live. This way, everyone won't be affected. How about it? As if he forced himself to say these words, Yang Chundong sat in the carriage and panted heavily. Tiger's Mane, who was waiting on him at the side, was anxious. Just a moment ago, the young master was still talking and laughing with them. How long had it been? How could his illness be so serious? This didn't seem like an act. How could an act be so realistic? You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.